The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The season, the 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great.
Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. Kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome in Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Off and rolling here on a Tuesday, a Victory Tuesday.
That's right.
We get to talk about a Bengals win today. Monday Night Football victory over the Dallas Cowboys. Bengals 27-20 on the road. We'll talk about that to open things up. But Justin Kenner with you here, along with our producer. We got Mr. Casey McAllister in the chair, leading the way for us, of course, and returning from vacation and back and looking refreshed and as beautiful as ever.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Elliot Rearing.
Wow, what a special moment. Thank you, Kenner. That was very special. And I'll tell you what, I am back, and it's good to see I come back to a Bengals win. Maybe that's all it took. I should just go to a new place every week, and maybe the Bengals will win.
If you go on vacation for the next 5 weeks, you think we can make the playoffs?
Yeah, I think we do. What are our playoff? Our playoff odds jumped from what?
2
Zero
to
to
3%.
0 to a half last night.
I think they're at 3 now.
Okay, 3%.
3 for Katie
Here we
Gold?
go. Here we go. Lock it in.
Would you be willing to make that sacrifice for the city?
Yeah,
To go on a 5-week
sure,
vacation to 5 different cities?
Sure, I'd make that sacrifice.
That's big of you.
I think I pick increasingly worse cities.
Okay.
We'll end up in Boise.
Ooh, I like that.
No disrespect, of course, to the great city of Boise, but that's where I want to end up.
Yeah, I mean, you could start in Nashville and then go to Cleveland.
That's
next
right.
week.
Okay, we'll do that.
Maybe out to Denver. That'd be beautiful.
Yeah, I like that. What's a city in Montana?
Bozeman?
Sure, let's go there. Is that in Montana?
That's the only Montana city I know.
I genuinely didn't know.
Where did you go, though? Where were you?
We were in Daytona.
It's on the hoodie.
Daytona. It is on the hoodie.
Oh, very
When
nice.
Elliot goes to the beach, he comes back with a hoodie. That's
Even in
special.
July?
Well,
That's
it was cold there. To be fair, it was very, very cold. Like at nighttime, it was like 40 degrees. During the day, it was like 60 and windy. So it was
beautiful.
It wasn't exactly like we're going away to the warm, hot weather of Florida. We got similar weather there as we did here, I'd imagine.
Yeah, we went to the Keys last year for Thanksgiving, thinking we'd go and it'd be nice and warm and golf, and no, it was like low 50s, rainy and windy the entire time. So that was, but that happens. But no, we're glad you're back. Jacob, good morning. How are you? You have done Chatterbox Bengals all season, and you have come in on a Monday or at least a post-Bengals game. It just looked absolutely miserable. I'm always looking at him like, man, I don't know how much stuff I could feed him today. I'm going to have to just kind of avoid him. But you got a smile on your face. You're energetic. You're ready to go. Probably just as much sleep as you do after a Bengals loss, but it's easier to get up in the morning.
Those primetime games, it's tough to wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
It's a quick alarm, but man, yeah, it's always fun when you get a win. Thanks to everyone that watched last night. It was a good time. It was a fun stream. Got to sing the song a few times. That's always makes it a little better. So yeah, it's good to get a win. I said last night right as soon as the post game started, that whole game the whole time just felt like one that we've lost time and time again this year. And it's nice to just have a bounce go your way.
I was going to say, it was the first time this season where we had a little bit of luck. Up until
Immediately after having no luck.
Correct. Up until this moment, the Bengals haven't had that lucky moment. You kind of felt it when in the Ravens game where Lamar took the snap off his shoulder pad and Bengals recovered and Zach Taylor ran it 6 straight times to settle for a 58-yard field goal with Evan McPherson. But other than that, we haven't really had a moment where something went our way. Last night it was very cool to see something so outrageous go our way. Because we did lose that game and we won it. So
Did you know what was going on? This is a safe space.
with the punt?
Yeah.
No idea.
Okay.
I thought
I didn't either.
I thought you would have had to maintain possession and then fumble it. I didn't know it was just a touch because it was already touched.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. It's once it passes the line of scrimmage. Once the other team touches it, it becomes a live ball, just like a normal punt. So John Mata recovered it, and it was just like recovering a fumble.
That's kind of wild. I had no idea the rules. I had not a clue about
Yeah, neither
anything.
did Zach Taylor. He was clueless. They panned over to him on the sideline, And it was...
That's our guy.
I would put it up there with one of his blankest stares ever. And that's a long list.
Well,
because he gives a mean blank stare.
The look was, how is this going to work against us?
Yeah.
Like, that's the look of, like, we just did something good, but like I know something just might have gone in our favor, but how is this going to hurt us?
Yeah.
Is that look. Yesterday, Jake and I talked about the Kansas City Chiefs and the fact that they're just annoying because literally they have not played well all season, but they're 12-1, and they literally find ways to win, accidentally find ways to win.
Yeah.
They doink in a field goal to win, and they just keep finding ways to win no matter what. The Bengals are just as consistent, just the opposite way. They are in every game. They are actually playing way better than the Chiefs offensively, and they just keep finding ways to lose the game. Under 2 minutes to go, obviously Cincinnati about to punt, hoping you bury the Cowboys back, in their territory, make them work for it in the final 2 minutes, but it just felt like, we've seen this movie before. We know how this movie is going to end, the way it ended against the Chiefs, the way it's ended against the Ravens both times, the way it ended against Pittsburgh, the way it ends against every single team with them not coming out on top. But then that happens, and all the momentum shifted in their favor. A couple plays later, boom, Jamar breaks a tackle, up the sideline, touchdown, and his magical season continues as well.
Yeah.
Burrow gets a lot, and rightfully so. Burrow's had a fantastic season, but Jamar Chase is arguably having as dominant a season at wide receiver as Joe Burrow is having at quarterback. Jamar Chase might even be having a better season at wide receiver than Joe Burrow is having at quarterback, and Joe Burrow's playing a hell of a year at quarterback.
Yeah.
I was telling him before, I'm not a Jamar Chase guy. He drives me up the wall, but he also gives me literally nothing to be upset about other than he's just not on my team. He does everything right. He talks his smack. He backs it up. He has the grill. He has the swag. He has everything. Jamar Chase, I want to love him, and he's just not on my team, so I can't. But he does everything right. I have nothing bad to say about him.
It's been unbelievable, and I think we might not appreciate Jamar Chase as much as we should in this city, and that's just because of how much everyone loves Joe Burrow, and that's not really a fault of Bengals fans. I don't blame them for that. Obviously, the quarterback's going to get that kind of notoriety, but we give him a lot of credit for all the great stuff that happens, and obviously he deserves a lot of that. But Jamar Chase is one of one unbelievable player. I think he's comfortably the best wide receiver in football after this season. I wouldn't have any problem saying that now. 93 catches on the year, over 1,300 yards, 15 touchdowns now on the season. In terms of the Triple Crown pursuit, he's up by 6 receptions on the next guy.
Confirmed.
150 yards and 6 touchdowns on the next leading receiver. Just an unbelievable season for Jamar Chase. No one is even close to him in terms of production this season, and it's just incredible that he's able to do this really week in and week out. He's been nothing short of incredible in a contract year, probably making the Bengals hurt a little bit for not extending him last offseason. Last night he had his 3rd game of the year with 10 receptions, 175 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns at least. No other player in the history of the NFL has more than 1 such game. He has 3 this year. So it's unbelievable what he's been able to do. It's insane.
Jamar Chase is by far the biggest winner of this season.
Yeah.
And it's not remotely close. Joe Burrow having an MVP season, but at the end of the day, you're the captain of a sinking ship. I don't blame Joe Burrow whatsoever, but that's the narrative that people are going to spin. Jamar Chase is absolutely the best wide receiver in the NFL. Like, coming into this year, it was Justin Jefferson. It was Justin Jefferson's crown, and Jamar Chase is probably a distant 2, maybe even 3. He is now distantly the number 1 wide receiver in the NFL. It's not. I don't even think it's remotely close how good this guy is compared to everybody else in the NFL. The Bengals are going to pay. Jacob just said it there. The Bengals are going to pay for not getting that contract done. He should be the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. Having a game with 11 catches and 264 yards and 3 touchdowns that was the Ravens November 7th. That's insanity. That's an insane game. And the fact that he's had 2 other games pretty damn similar to that, it's out of this world. So Jamar Chase, by far the biggest winner. He's going to get paid more than any other wide receiver has ever been paid. And he deserves every single penny and probably more.
Yeah, they've been doing that, against good defenses, bad defenses, and you look at the teams that they have coming up, not just winnable games, but defenses that he should continue to feast upon. He's had a magical season up to this point, but just how good, reflectively, can this entire season be over the next 4 weeks? he keeps on this pace, we're looking at record numbers for Jamar Chase. You guys were talking off air a little bit ago just in regards to the Offensive Player of the Year. It's unlikely just because it seems like that's all going to go to Saquon Barkley, on an 11-2 team right now, a team that will finish in first and contend for a 1 seed over in the NFC. But man, oh man, that will be another victim of a bad losing record this season because I think if the Bengals the record's even just reversed, I think Jamar Chase is the front runner to win Offensive Player of the Year with the way he's played this season. But how much better can this season get with 4 weeks to go?
Yeah, I mean, it's who knows, man? Who knows? You can obviously project a lot of things forward, his yards per game and everything along those lines. You could go and guess how many yards he ends up with. But when he drops a 14-catch game in there and then a 264-yard game in there, 1, 2, 3, 4 multi-touchdown games this year, you can't predict anything for Jamar Chase because he's at 1,300 yards now. By the end of this season, who's to say in the 4-game stretch he can't get 800 yards again because he's done it in 4 games this year. So, I mean, that what did Michael Jordan say? The ceiling is the roof for Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
There's no limit on what he's able to do. And the other thing that gets kind of brushed under the rug, I think, with him in this season, with the crazy high reception total leading the league, the crazy high yardage total leading the league, he's still over 14 yards per catch. Yeah. Usually when guys get this close to 100 catches this early in the season, you don't have that kind of production consistently catch to catch. It's a lot of underneath stuff, and he turns that underneath stuff into big plays. 14.2 average on the season. His production is just so consistent and so great that I hope he does get some recognition for this season. I don't think it's going to be Offensive Player of the Year, like Kinner said, with the record and what I think Saquon Barkley is going to be able to do as this season progresses. But certainly the Triple Crown is within reach, and he's made it known how much that means to him. And certainly, barring an injury, I think he's sitting pretty to win that award.
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities he sets the yardage record this season. He's at, 13-19?
Yeah.
Needs roughly 600 more yards in 5 games. That could happen. And then, not to mention, I think Randy Moss holds the touchdown in the season record. 23. We're 8 away from that. He scores 2 touchdowns a game. Yeah. It's not completely out of the realm of possibilities that Jamar Chase sets the single season touchdown and receiving yards record this year. It's truly going to be one of the best, most impressive seasons a wide receiver's ever had, and the fact that we're sitting here at 5-8 is kind of a joke, but that's the way the cookie crumbles, unfortunately, in Cincinnati.
Yeah, no, very, very unfortunate for sure, but I think it is, some of these numbers are a little bit inflated because of the record, I think, having to score a lot of points in a lot of these games. The output Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase have been able to do, they're both incredible. They're both the best at their position in the league, in my opinion. But I do think some of these numbers are a product of having to score 40 points a game and having to come back at every point in time and having to be perfect and not really having a run game to fall back on. I think the Bengals in the future, when they're better, when they are competing for a Super Bowl again pretty soon, I don't think we're going to see necessarily these high of numbers in the seasons when the Bengals are better and more competitive. So I do think even though the season's so disappointing for Bengals fans, obviously the expectations were that we were going to be in New Orleans at the end for the Super Bowl and all that stuff. But it's important to recognize what some of these stars are doing because I don't know if we're ever going to see seasons like this again because better teams have more people to disperse the kind of production. And I think the level of reliance on Jamar Chase this year might be the last of that in terms of the way the Bengals rebuild the roster, but we certainly have to appreciate what he's doing because it's incredible.
What might help him too is it's not just the total receiving yards, but what might help him is the fact that he leads the league in yards after the catch.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we even saw that last night. He gets the catch, and I mean, the spin move and just his ability to break away from the defense once the ball's in his hand. He's making a lot of stuff happen once the ball is in his hand, too. It's not just as simple as, he's just getting deep bombs thrown to him down the field, catching it, and boom, he's in the end zone. I mean, he's getting a lot of targets, a lot of catches, obviously, and he's maximizing it. The yards after the catch, I think it's right here at 626 yards after the catch. It leads the NFL. When that ball's in his hands, he's making things happen. It's not just he's catching the ball in space and he's wide open, and that's what the numbers are. He's literally making things happen after the catch, of course, which is adding to his successful season. But which one's more likely, the yards record or the touchdown record, do you think, for Jamar Chase?
I would say the yards.
Yards.
I would say the yards, but I don't 8 touchdowns in 5 games. How How crazy is that for the season he's had so far? 4 games.
4 games.
So it'd have to be 2 a game.
He scored how many multi-touchdown games?
5.
1, 2, 3. You said 5. So five games with multi-touchdowns. 9 total games. 9 total games with touchdowns. So it's a better than not chance that Jamar is going to score 2 in a game than just 1, which is pretty absurd. I still think the yards is way more attainable, obviously, because he has 3 games with 177, 264, 193. So it's just crazy.
The Titans, I don't really follow the Titans that much. They have the number 1 passing defense in the NFL, which I found that to be kind of interesting. So the yardage, I mean, both. You have to work for both. I want to say the touchdowns. I think I'm just falling for the number 8. It's just a small number, but it's not a small number when you talk about touchdowns, of course. But both are attainable with the season that he is having. And the fact that if the Bengals, and we're going to talk about that P word coming up, the playoffs, obviously if they are mathematically back into that equation a little bit, they do play Denver coming up. Denver has a tough schedule to close out. That window could be cracked again for Cincinnati. So if they are playing in meaningful games down the stretch, you're going to play a team in Cleveland that's already been eliminated from the playoffs. They could be checked out by then. And then Pittsburgh, when you play them in the final week, it could be one of those two where they're resting all of their guys. And we saw what they did to their defense when they were trying just, last week. So I think there are going to be teams coming up that the Bengals, while still playing for something, some teams aren't and may not be going out there with that full effort. That door might be open for some of those records, but we'll see. Cincinnati last night, again, 27-20 the final, their second one-possession win of the season. That's the 12 one-possession games they've played in this year. 2-10 is their record. We'll talk about that when we come back, plus that P word, playoffs. I saw you did one of these. You turned your head to the side. You kind of gave me the look.
Yeah.
But what about this guy? I wonder what this guy's thoughts are on that P word. What do you think, Jake? We'll talk about it when we come back more off the bench next. All right, and we are back. Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister, Elliott Rearing, Jacob Tissett. This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. 27-20 the final last night. Cincinnati 5-8 on the season, and of course that was their 12th one-possession game of the year. They're 2-10, 2-10 in one-possession games on the year. And again, we talk about just how just drastically different if one play goes differently in a lot of those 10 losses that they've had in one-possession games, just how drastically different the season can be. I always love these what-if standings graphics when they pop out. What if you reversed every result of a one-possession NFL game? All right, what if every one-possession NFL game had the opposite results right there? Cincinnati, 10-2 on the season.
Yeah, I mean, what if the Bengals were good? This is this kind of stuff that you have to talk about it on sports talk radio, but it's the type of stuff that kind of wants me to bang my head against a wall because it's just like it's not what happened. It can't happen. The Chiefs have won every one possession game. The Bengals have lost every one possession game. One team's good, one team's not. It's just how it is. The Bengals weren't a good team this year.
Right.
The defense is the worst defense in the history of organized anything. And you sit here today, 3 games below 500 with 5 total games left or 4 games left. How much? 4 games left, right? There's a 0.0 chance for the Bengals to make the playoffs, but we can talk about it a little bit.
There's not. There's a 3% chance.
There's a 0.000% chance the Bengals make the playoffs.
3.2.
Yeah, I mean if they win out and there's
help
and there's COVID, then maybe we get a little COVID help.
Maybe if we play Shelton Rankins, you can get the other team sick.
That's true. Maybe that could happen as well. I still have a heart. Well, I mean, we'll see what happens because I do believe at some point some of these guys are going to continue to get benched. I guess once that number hits 0 is when it'll happen. But in terms of playoffs, I'm just here for a good time. George Strait. I'm not here for a long time. I'm here for a good time. So that's what we're going to do here. I would have liked, honestly, I wouldn't have hated a loss. There was the first game last night I watched this season without any stress. I didn't have any stress. I didn't have any bad vibes. I'm just going to enjoy this for what it is. The Bengals are going to score some points. They're going to give up a lot of points, and we're going to have a fun night watching football.
We are, without a doubt, the most fun 5-8 team of all time.
Yes.
I mean, usually teams this bad are a bore to watch, and you're
Cowboys,
watching Daniel
tough to
Jones,
watch.
Cooper Rush. Like, a lot of these, these bottom of the barrel teams are insanely, terrible to watch. You're watching paint dry. You're banging your head against the wall. But the Bengals, man, they'll find a new way to lose, or they'll invent a new rule to win. So it's fun. It's about as fun as a 5-8 season can be, I think.
Yeah.
Peak 5-8 season. Which is the worst.
I'll never forget this season.
Oh, no, never.
This will not be a forgettable season by any means.
It is about the friends we made along the way.
It is. It's always been about the friends you make along the way. The Bengals have made a lot of friends this year. Khalil Herbert.
I think that's it.
Who is that one linebacker they said? Lawrence Guy?
Oh, yeah. No, he played here.
That was a friend along the way.
He did play here.
Anybody else?
I mean, last night, the best corner on the team.
Leonard Fournette, that rumor. I don't even know if he worked out.
He did work out.
Okay,
I think
that was
he
a friend you make along
in the
the
building.
way.
Marco Wilson did Bengals debut last night.
Okay, who was the former Dolphin that came in to work out? He didn't sign with us.
Xavier Howard.
I wouldn't call him a friend, but he was here.
I don't know if you want to be friends with him.
Signing out of that group.
What?
Who was the guy that we ended up signing out of that group?
Marco Wilson.
The running back?
Corner?
I thought we got a running back out of that group.
We traded for Khalil Herbert.
We traded for Khalil Herbert. That was one of the greatest trades of all time.
I'll look it up. I don't think that's right.
But yeah, this season will go down as one of the more disappointing seasons ever. But as long as we can finish strong or finish bad, just don't finish in the middle.
Yeah.
Either end really, really good or just lose out.
Last night killed the draft, by the way.
Killed the draft?
Yeah.
Out of the top 10.
There's no reason to root for draft anymore. It's cooked.
I guess there's not really a big difference between, 12 and 15?
I think the biggest difference in the draft is like 11 and 12 to 13 through 15.
If there was ever a time to have Kinner's draft model, this would be it.
This would be it.
I will keep
Man,
it
right.
in
This
your
would
face.
be it.
The
This is
Bengals
the
would be
karma,
going in,
by the way.
Bengals would be going into next year with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Will Campbell if it was Kinner's draft model.
Brightwell.
He never made the roster.
He's on practice squad.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just. I mean, for as much blank as I took for that,
Yeah.
it was actually a Bengals model. That
It is a Bengals model.
Let me ask you this. Are the Bengals the best 5-8 team in the history of the league? And are the Chiefs the worst 12-1 team?
Would the
history of the
five?
league?
No, the Chiefs are not the worst 12-1 team in the history of the league. The Chiefs are the worst 12-1 team in the last 5 years.
Steelers?
The 12-0 Steelers went 12-1.
Steelers, that's right. That's right.
Would the 4-8, 5-8 Bengals beat the 12-0 Steelers? The 2020 12-0 Steelers?
Yeah, they would.
I think they would.
They would.
So earlier when we showed that graphic about the one possession games, if you flip the results of those games, Bengals would be 10-2 on the year. I know it's tougher to give them credit to say, hey, that like this is how close that they are, even with a historically bad defense. But I know we don't want to use that for any kind of analysis at all, but I will say that graphic is also being used against the Chiefs. Like, I know people say I've learned not to bet against the Kansas City Chiefs, but at some point, if you're going to have all your luck in the regular season, it's going to catch up with you in the postseason. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. They're going to three-peat. That'd be the first time that that's happened. So they would, knock off a lot of narratives if that's the case. But I think you can look at that one possession loss chart or the reversal of the standings and realize that as bad as everyone thinks that this Bengals team is, they are this close. They're still mathematically 3.2% to be exact in the hunt for the playoffs. But that's used against the Chiefs. The Chiefs are 12-1, as you talked about, and everyone's like, oh, man, that's the number one team. They're going to get the number one seed in the AFC, no doubt about it. But I don't know how good I feel about them once you get to the postseason as far as guaranteeing a Chiefs win in every single playoff game moving forward. They're vulnerable. They're very vulnerable. They're very beatable. And then I look at the Bengals, who they're beatable, obviously, at 5-8 at this point of the season, but they're also just right there. They are right there. I mean, you look at the fact that the majority of all those losses are all against 500 or better teams. They're all against teams that are going to be competing in the playoffs at some point. It's one of those. Those are all playoff teams, and you're that close. I think that it does show how close that the Bengals are when it comes to this offense right now, and even with how bad that defense is. So I get, but like in baseball, we do that all the time. We talk about the Reds, one loss, one run loss, as all season.
At least Elliott's consistent. He says that's dumb too.
I agree.
You don't like that one in baseball? Okay, fair. You don't like that in baseball, though?
No, I don't like it because win the game. I mean, the one loss thing, one possession game, that's all fine and dandy. But we've seen how those games have panned out. The Bengals have had chances to win those games, and they didn't win them. It's not like it was a 2-score game. You cut it to 1-score game at the end. You had a chance to win. You could have been the better team, and you weren't consistently. So that's how I see the Bengals. And the one loss though, or the 1-score loss thing, you can talk about it coming into next year, and maybe that's how you justify keeping some of the coaches on this staff, unfortunately. But I don't think that's an accurate way to look at how this Bengals season has gone. There has been a clear step back from the past couple of years, a clear, evident step back. And you can blame it on the luck. Honestly, I would give the Bengals more benefit of the doubt for not having a single thing fall their way if you're going to do anything. Because in 1-score losses, you have to have a little bit of luck, or 1-score wins, you have to have a little bit of a luck. Bengals haven't had any luck whatsoever this season. Last night, again, the very first time anything remotely lucky happened. And to not have any of those this year is brutal. Every team has luck. Every team has little moments where they probably shouldn't have had something happen, fall their way, and it did. Bengals haven't been a part of that yet this season, and it's good to see that happen last night. But you can't blame luck, and you can't blame not finishing games. They didn't close out all of their losses. I think they had a chance to win every single one of them at some point in the game. They had a chance to put the nail in the coffin on the Ravens twice. You had a chance to put the nail in the coffin on the Chiefs. You had a chance to put the nail in the coffin against the Steelers. Every single game you have these chances, and consistently they don't come up in those moments. That's on somebody. I don't know who it's on, but it's going to be on somebody, and the graph does nothing for me.
I think the graph's pretty damning for Zach Taylor, honestly.
I agree.
To have that many 1-score losses, that many situational failures. I know if you look at it big picture and we talk about, everything that happened in each of those games play by play, then you can break it down and put the blame on a lot of different people. But I think when it happens time and time again and you can't get over the hump in those close games, I think that's a reflection of the coaching staff. And I think a lot of things as we get later in the season, as a guy that's defended this coaching staff for the majority of the season, is starting to just mount against most of the guys here.
Yeah, the Chiefs, by the way, you reversed their win-loss record based on the results of a 1-possession loss. They'd be 2-10 on the year. That's how close their margin of error is for them as well. Nonetheless,
but things also go their way in terms of officiating, and we can talk about that in a little bit too. But officials don't throw anything the Bengals' direction. Nothing. There's been a couple games where, the Bengals have benefited from officiating, but last night it was very clear that there is nobody helping Joe Burrow here. It's Joe Burrow versus the world. And it's been a league-wide thing, too. It hasn't just been the Bengals. They've been missing face masks consistently. They've been missing holds. They've been having terrible calls every single game. And we've come to just expect that in the NFL. Nothing will ever be done. But I think it's absolutely ludicrous that Joe Burrow can take a dirty hit after the play is over, and he can take a face mask where his helmet spins completely around like an owl. And if that happened to Patrick Mahomes, there'd be a witch hunt. The FBI would be involved, and these players would be thrown in federal prison for 5 years. If anything got close to that, and when you're 5-8, you don't get to complain about officials. You don't get to You don't get to have that insurance policy. We can blame the officials for this game. Not when you're 5-8. You can't really do it when you're 5-8. But there is an expectation I have that referees in the NFL should be significantly better than they are. And if you have the ability to have an eye in the sky, and basically the refs on the ground are just the earpiece for what the cameras up top are telling them, that's what it should be. And the fact that it's not, we have a chance to right these wrongs, and they don't consistently, is a tough place to be.
By the way, Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Let's talk about the P word, playoffs. I know you guys lightly touched on it, but I wanted to pop up the playoff bracket or the playoff standings for you. Take a look here. It's what it looks like at the moment. But obviously the Chiefs, Bills, your 1 and 2 seed. No one really cares about the top. Bengals aren't competing for that. What we're keeping an eye on is right there at the bottom. When you look at the Chargers and the Broncos, and actually, let's forget the Chargers. I don't even think it's about the Chargers at this point. I think it's about that 7th spot. I think Denver's actually really good. I think they're one of the more feel-good stories of football this year when you look at what they've been able to do with Bo Nix and the way they've just slowly progressed as the season has gone on. I didn't buy into them at 5-3, but that defense is legitimate. They are a legitimate contending team right there. But at the same time, when you have a rookie quarterback who has shown flashes of being very capable to play in this league, he's also shown flashes of being a rookie quarterback. So with that being said, I think that they are vulnerable. When you look at who the Broncos have coming up, all right, with that three more wins than the Bengals, it is very unlikely. I get that people are looking at that saying that there's no chance. But when you look at the fact that Denver is 8-5 right now, when you look at who they played to close out their regular season, they have the Colts, they have the Chargers on the road, by the way. They are at Cincinnati and the Kansas City Chiefs. That schedule right there, I'll be very surprised if it's 2-2 is what you would hope if you're a Denver Broncos fan. That gets you to the 10-win mark. But if they're 1-3, I think that does open the door for Cincinnati to have a chance. When you look at who they have to play down the stretch, especially because they do play Cincinnati, Cincinnati does control the outcome of that as well. And the fact that Cincinnati is playing the Titans, they're playing the Browns, who have just been eliminated from playoff contention, and they do play the Steelers, yes, in the final week, but the Steelers right now are in a position where they're going to have a playoff spot secured by then. They're not going to be playing for anything of significance unless it does come down to the division and they have to play that final week. I know you want to say it's a 0% chance. 3.2 even sounds almost impossible. But when you just strip it down to the two teams that are involved here, the Bengals and the Broncos, I think the window is more than just slightly cracked. I think there is a shot here for the Cincinnati Bengals to get into this, or maybe not. Jake, I guess we'll start with you. You say it's a 0% chance.
It's not a 0% chance because of the math. They have a chance in terms of the math. I've just seen this game far too long. I know how this story ends, and it's not with the Bengals in the postseason. They haven't beaten anybody with a winning record, so I'm not going to sit here and expect that to happen at any point during this season. Would it shock me if the Broncos fell off the face of the earth? No. I don't think their offense is that good. I really don't. I don't trust Bo Nix. I'm not a believer. The Miami Dolphins, would it shock me if the Miami Dolphins lose out? No, because I don't think the Miami Dolphins are that good. Would it shock me if the Colts lose out? No. Wouldn't shock me at all if they fell apart. But it's not. I'm not even. You're not playing the other teams right now. You can sit there and scoreboard watch all you want. The Bengals haven't done their job this season. If the Bengals had done their job at any point in a big game this year, then I'd say, yeah, they have a chance. But they don't have a chance because they consistently don't wake up for the big game. Last night's game, whatever. That's a 1 o'clock.
That Cowboys team sucks.
That Cowboys team's a really bad team. The running back had 130 yards on 20 carries. They somehow managed to
He had his first 100 game of his career last week.
Yeah,
And by the way, you notice how you guys are saying the running back and he, because you probably don't even remember.
Hey, it's Rico Dowdle. Show him some respect.
Well, that sounds like a good running back.
He is a good running back. I have him on my fantasy team.
All right.
I have him on my fantasy team as well. Listen, there's absolutely a chance, and especially coming into next week's this coming week's a massive week. The Colts play the Broncos. You have to have the Colts win that game.
This is what a lot of people keep forgetting as well. Is it's not just a Bengals-Broncos race.
Okay.
The Dolphins are still in this. The Colts are still in this. Like, it's a 4-team race, and the Bengals are a game or two behind, depending on who you're looking at.
So if the Colts beat the Broncos this week and the Dolphins lose to the Texans on the road, then we can and by the way, the Bengals still have to win, then yeah, maybe then we can start whispering it into my ear that something's possible. But as of this very second, the Bengals have a 0% chance because they don't come up in big games.
All right, what about that P word, Jake?
Look, it's not likely. I'm not going to act like it's likely. The 3.2% number is probably pretty close to what the odds are. I wouldn't say it's a ton higher than that. I think the way I'm operating right now, and really especially after that win last night, loss for the Cowboys last night to move them up the draft order, I don't think there's anything else that's worthwhile rooting for. So you might as well hold on to that 3%. You might as well try to win these games. I mean, I've been the guy here telling you for weeks that it'd be better to lose some games and pick higher in the draft. I've been starting my big board before the college football playoffs start, and a lot of these guys, the drop-off from the blue chip prospects in the top of this draft to the middle is pretty drastic. But after last night, it's going to take some shocking losses to bad teams for the Bengals to get to pick high enough to take one of those blue chip players. So at this point, let's hold on to the 3%. Let's have as much fun as we can. Let's beat some bad teams and then maybe muck it up against the Broncos and sneak in at the end. And if we don't, let's not sneak in at 9-8. Let's win out and set some culture up for next year and have these guys buy in. I'm all in on winning the games now. It's a different story if you lose last night because then you'd have a real conversation about getting into the top 8 or maybe even the top 5. But after that win, sitting at 5-8, yeah, you're looking at a 13 through 18 probably, depending on how many wins you can rip off here, and I think those are all more or less the same. So I'm rooting for the playoffs, and I'm choosing to believe.
I will say this. If they were to make the playoffs, the Bengals are the very last team any team in this league would want to play. The very last team.
Out of all those wildcard teams I listed, I think that's pretty comfortable to say, as long as you leave out the Ravens as the 5 seed. Because I think they're kind of outside of that conversation. Chargers, Broncos, Colts, Dolphins, Bengals. One of those AFC North teams is going to get the 5 seed. But out of the rest of those wildcard teams, you can't tell me the Bengals aren't the scariest. I mean, maybe the Chargers, but without J.K. Dobbins, we've seen how their run game has kind of shriveled up a little bit. He should be back by the playoffs, but I certainly think the Bengals are the scariest. I said it on last night's Chatterbox Bengals. I said, I think the Bengals' odds to make the playoffs are basically the same as their odds to win the Super Bowl. And I'm not saying that if they get in, they're going to win the Super Bowl, but they have a 3% chance to make the playoffs. And usually with the odds that low, you have a, 0.00001 chance to win the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
I think the Bengals have a 3% chance to make the Super Bowl. Because you give Joe Burrow a ticket to the dance, and maybe he can make something happen. Now, you only got to win a couple games. You just got to get hot. I'm not saying it's likely by any means, but that's why Bengals fans this whole season have been holding on to those playoff hopes, because we know regardless of the record, regardless of the heartbreaking losses, we have Joe Burrow playing quarterback, and we're going to have a chance in these games.
I don't like how you guys are turning me on this, because I'm starting to get in. I'm starting to get back in.
There's nothing else to root for. If there was draft to root for, I would do that.
I will say this, and Sean Connor with the chat, the Bengals D is feared by 0 playoff teams.
That is correct.
That's fair, but here's the thing with a shootout, and a good old-fashioned shootout is what you're going to get when you play the Cincinnati Bengals. You better make damn sure your offense is ready to go.
And the other thing that we've learned is it doesn't matter if you have a good defense or a bad defense.
Yeah.
The Bengals are going to make it a shootout. I mean, they did it against the Chargers, who had the number 1 defense in the league going into it.
Steelers,
right. And
So
they allowed 44.
So it's like, well,
They got shot out.
best game in Russell Wilson's career. At age 60.
40, yeah.
Yeah, so, and of all those wildcard teams you talked about, no one will fear the Bengals defense. There's going to be something about all of those teams that teams don't fear. That's why they're inconsistent and they've had enough losses to be on the bubble to begin with. But of all those teams that have something you don't fear, of all those teams, the Bengals have the number one thing that everyone will fear, and that is Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. Those three right there, that offense right there is what you would fear at the end of the day. So, all right, this is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. 27-20 the final last night. The Bengals over the Dallas Cowboys. Finally, some feel-good vibes for Bengals fans here on a Tuesday, technically. But nonetheless, let's talk about the postgame, though. Joe Burrow had a lot of interesting things to say in the postgame, and it has everybody not talking about the future being the playoffs, but the future being next season. We talked about how teams could fear a Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and a T. Higgins appearance in the playoffs. But what about an appearance from T. Higgins next season? Joe Burrow had a lot to say about that possibility in the postgame yesterday. We'll talk about that when we come back.
I'm ready.
Um, 27-20 the final. The Bengals over the Dallas Cowboys last night, Monday Night Football, 5-8 the record for the Bengals. We talked about, of course, doing that thing where we see you win and then you start to get your interest peaked back in the playoffs a little bit. Elliot, just slightly more than when the show started. So there's that. But let's look ahead to next season. We now know, of course, we've talked about all the issues that this team is going to have to address in the offseason. A lot of issues and question marks on the defense. The offensive line needs some tinkering. Obviously, you like Brown, but the run game's still one of the worst in football. There's a lot of things that this team has to address. But last night in the postgame, Joe Burrow addressed the future of T. Higgins and the possibility and the likelihood of T. Higgins returning to Cincinnati next year. Here's Joe Burrow in the postgame.
I'm confident that I think we're going to be able to do what it takes to bring T back. And, know that I'm going to do what it takes to get him back, and so is he. We've had those talks, so those are going to be off-season discussions, but I think we're excited about that opportunity.
What gives you that confidence that you'd be able to get T. Higgins back based off of what's gone on so far?
We'll see.
That was Joe Burrow in the postgame last night. Very weird, strange comments coming after a game like that. There's nothing wrong with these comments, by the way. I'm just saying I thought it was weird that that's the spot where they dove into that conversation, if you will. But that's been dominating a lot of the headlines. I know on First Take and Get Up, they've already discussed this already today. But curious your guys' thoughts on that. Joe Burrow addressed it. With all the question marks this team has, the future of T. Higgins is one of the biggest question marks that they addressed last night in the postgame following their big win over the Cowboys on Monday Night Football. Surprised that the T. Higgins conversation was as much of a vocal point last night?
No, not really at all. I think it's going to be the biggest talking point for the rest of the season as it rolls on, now that we're not asking about the playoffs and what record Joe thinks we need to sneak in. So, yeah, I think it's going to be the theme of the rest of the season. And I know there's a lot of holes on defense. We need to revamp the offensive line. We need a lot of pieces. T. Higgins in the wide receiver, too, is my biggest question going into next year. Are you going to bring him back? Are you going to spend money or draft capital on that position? I don't know what the right answer is, but figuring out what the Bengals are going to do with that position is going to be what sets up the rest of the offseason. So it's certainly the biggest question as we move forward throughout this season. And with a game like last night where T. Higgins plays, is not hampered by an injury, at least it is reported of that, and then he puts up an absolute stinker and disappears in prime time. I think that's when those conversations arise, because it's been reported time and time again from any and everyone outside of Cincinnati that he's going to get $30+ million from some team in free agency. And if that's what he's going to demand, then games like last night, coupled with the soft tissue injuries that have caused him to miss so much time, I don't think he's worth $30 million, not in Cincinnati, not when you have Jamar Chase. But I think there is certainly a price point where it makes a ton of sense to bring T. Higgins back. I think my magical number is about $70 million. Anything below $70 million for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins combined, I'm pretty okay with doing that. 42-28, something along those lines for the contracts for those two players. I think that is right around the price point where I would be okay bringing both of those guys back this offseason. But even though those average per year numbers work very well in the salary cap for the Bengals over the next few years, and that's what a lot of people keep looking at, in order to extend Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow and revamp this defense and maybe extend Trey Hendrickson, the Bengals are going to need what? $200 million in cash in escrow?
Yeah.
Where are they getting that money? I don't know that the Bengals have the capability to extend all these people, unless we're taking out loans or something along those lines. I don't know, but certainly interesting as we go through the offseason to see how they handle all this, because that's a lot of money that we have not seen Mike Brown be able to produce before.
I think last night was a little bit of a statement from Joe Burrow saying, we're going to do that because I want it to happen. And at this point, if you're Joe Burrow, he needs something to look forward to. He needs a reason to stay in Cincinnati. And I know what he gets paid $55 million. True, he does. He's under contract for a while, and he gets paid a heck of a lot of money to play here. Saying that, we know how this league works. We know how professional sports works. If you don't like your current situation and you're a star player, you can get out of whatever contract you sign. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying it's how it is. We know it's how it is in professional sports. Last night it seemed to me like he was telling the front office without telling the front office that we are going to bring T. Higgins back, or we're going to have different conversations. Because the offense works phenomenally when T. Higgins is out there. It looks unstoppable. If you take that away, I don't know what you have, because you have absolutely nothing in Jermaine Burton. Shout out to Zach Taylor for that one. And outside of that, no disrespect to Yoshi, he's like a wide receiver 4 on a good team, wide receiver 3 on a bad team. So that's what you have to deal with coming into next season. And if I'm Joe Burrow, I sit back and I say, I'm going to put up the same numbers again next year. What's my best chance to do that? It's going to be having Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, who are, by the way, probably his best friends on the team.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring both of those guys back with as much power as I have. I'm going to use it all to get them back.
See, I disagree slightly with that mindset, only because you talked about the numbers he's going to put up next year, and how do they get better? That's defense. That's defense. And to me, when you keep T. Higgins, you're keeping him at the expense of somebody else. And what I mean, and somebody else that may not even be on this roster right now, it takes the place of a potential free agent that you can get. You have to ask yourself, do you want T. Higgins at that 28 to 30 mil number? Or do you want a couple players on defense that can come in and help make a difference right away? We've talked about the fact that this defense doesn't even have to be elite. It just needs to be average to complement, this offense. I know Joe Burrow wants to play with T. Higgins and all this stuff, but you have to use logic of the cap, the salary cap, and the limitations of the ability for this team to draft and develop and hit in free agency, something that they haven't been able to do consistently over the last couple of years that technically has put them in this particular situation to begin with. It's not that I don't want T. Higgins back in Cincinnati. I'm just taking my Browns cap off and just being, just analyzing this situation. It's not that I don't want T. Higgins back in Cincinnati, but T. Higgins back in Cincinnati means that's $28 million or $30 million less to use towards fixing all the holes that exist on this roster. The whole reason they're 5-8 is not because of Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase. It's because they literally have no defense. Their O-line, although they've invested into that, still has a lot of question marks. I do like what we've seen from Brown at times, but again, they're one of the worst run games in football. Obviously, because they're trailing in games or having to lean into their strength of passing, they haven't really relied on the run a lot either. But the bottom line is this team has way too many question marks to look at Joe Burrow and say, sure, we'll bow down to you and give you T. Higgins. Joe Burrow, stick to being a quarterback and let the front office dig themselves out of the hole that they put themselves in, especially Joe Burrow at 55. You're going to give Jamar Chase that 40 to 42 range. That's going to put you close to that 100 mil. And if they do go that route with T. Higgins, so doing that math with what your number was,
about 120.
About 120. That's fine, but that's $120 million. That's all on 3 players. That's money and then you have the remainder of that cap. About 240 is the total. So you subtract that 120. Now you
should go up to about 260 next year,
and that still gives them it's about 160, 100 whatever mil to work with to fill out the rest of the roster.
So my question is that makes sense if you have 28 million going somewhere else.
Okay.
My thing is, I think you'd have about 13 million going somewhere else. Because you'd have to spend $15 million on a wide receiver too.
Yep. And that's fine, but that's
so. In that case, is a $13 million player elsewhere better than having T. Higgins on your team and a lesser receiver than T. Higgins? And are we playing the Bengals game and saying they can't do both? Because they can within the number if we're talking about a $13 million player being the trade and not a $20+ million player. Yeah. So I think that's important to look at too, because you're either paying a receiver in free agency to replace T. Higgins or you're using high draft capital on a receiver first, second, third round. Both of those could then be used to help the defense as well. So I don't think it's as much as a one-for-one trade as you're necessarily making it out to be, but certainly that is something that has to come into the conversation.
A couple other things. You said it's not logical. What's more logical, though? Keeping T. Higgins and having the offense hum, or the Bengals somehow being good at developing talent and or signing good defensive talent? What's more logical out of those two? And for me, it's an easy just keep T. Higgins and we'll keep the offense going. Because it's also Zach Taylor. Zach Taylor, despite whatever we say, he's not getting fired, yada, yada, yada. The seat is warm. I mean, Zach Taylor can't just skate by for the next year and a half here. He's got to do something. Zach Taylor knows that if the whole city and the front office, if they're going to give him the pass for the special teams and defense being absolute dog water, then he knows the offense has to be good. Has Zach Taylor developed good offensive talent a ton in his career? Has he? I haven't seen it. His number one golden boy, Jermaine Burton's too busy playing penny slots.
He was so happy about that pick, too.
So I'm not going to sit here and say that Zach Taylor is going to rely on his own ability to come up, draft, and develop wide receiving talent. I have imagined that he's on that hot seat, and he's going to be siding with Joe Burrow on this because he knows his meal ticket is through that offense. It's through Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase. That's where if you take away a key contributor from that offense, what is Zach Taylor? What is he? Because he's not a good head coach. He's a fine offensive coordinator. Fine. That's what he is if you take away a third of this incredible offense.
So and it goes back to that. So if there's 160 in salary cap remaining, are you confident, based on what we've seen from this front office, to maximize that 160? And I guess that's the concern I have when you now you brought up a good point.
But that's fair.
You have to address the wide receiver too, whether it's T. Higgins or a portion of that 30. And then you'll have about, let's say it's the 15 number, so you have about 18 remaining, 18 to 15, or 15 to 18 remaining. You still have to address something. But again,
Yeah.
it's just because this team shot themselves in the foot. Because I do think you could have talked about really bringing him back if they lived up to expectations this year, because they wouldn't have as many holes to fill. I just think because you have so many holes to fill, I think that would be a very dangerous thing to do, although makes them more fun to watch. But you talked about, Elliot, you got to keep this offense humming. This offense humming at the highest of levels has them at 5-8. Now, it's not why they're losing games. They're losing games at the expense of that because of the fact that they can't get that defense right. And continuing to, and you're about to give Jamar a boatload of money, and you're going to give T a boatload of money if that's the case. Now you're limited as far as that's concerned. It's not that I'm anti-T Higgins I agree with everything you're saying. He makes that offense even better. But that's why the cap exists, is to be able to keep teams from being able to remain just these powerhouses moving forward. You have to be able to draft right. It goes all back to the conversations we've had all season with this team, even when we had the Jamar Chase argument.
Yeah.
Not too long ago. Casey, are you trying to... Did you have something?
Well, the only thing I was thinking of was, I mean, the Bengals defense can't get much worse anyways. So despite how much money or how much we try to invest into improving the defense, it's going to impact next year regardless. Like, if you decide to go with T. Higgins, you're still going to be able to make moves to improve this defense because it is at the bottom. It can't get any further down. So that being said, I'm kind of on board with keeping T. Higgins because I think I'd rather keep talent. I'm tired of letting talent just walk out the door scot-free. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the play here, because there's no other way to spend that money really efficiently and keep the offense at the same level or near the same level, whereas you already know what the level is on defense. It can't get much worse. And you already know you're going to be shifting players around. Almost the entire starting lineup on defense is going to be shifted. So it doesn't matter who you go out and get, to be honest, because they're already the bottom. Those guys are already at the bottom. You're going to marginally improve regardless of.
I think we said the same thing about Nick Scott playing safety last year.
What, that it couldn't get much worse?
Yeah, and then we went out and signed Geno Stone. It's worse.
Big play last night.
He did have a big play. Couple big plays.
He had a big play.
You want to guess what his PFF grade was last night? At least right after the game?
81.
Yeah.
Was it really?
Yeah.
How about that?
Second highest game of his career. You know what the first highest game of his career was?
Against the Bengals?
Yep, 94 against
How
the
about
Bengals
that?
Week 2 last year.
How about that? Listen, if I could trust
Got him a contract.
If I could trust the Cincinnati Bengals at being good at their jobs and signing good talent, then sure, I'd say let's trade T. Higgins and let's draft some defensive players and maybe hit on one for the first time ever. That's what I would like to happen. Is it going to happen? I'd imagine not. We'll see. We'll see. Again, the defense doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be great. It doesn't even have to be in the middle. It just can't be the worst. And it is the worst. Like you talk about those one-score games, if the defense was ranked 20th instead of 32nd, you win half of them at least. If they're ranked 25th instead of 32nd, you win half of them at least. I'm not asking for the world's best defense here. I'm asking for a couple guys that can do their job efficiently. The Bengals have like 3 defensive players that do their job well. 3.
Last thing on this to wrap it up, because we all know our takes on this, and we've talked about this for weeks, even before this. My question is the why, not why do you bring T. Higgins back? Why did Joe Burrow? Joe Burrow is very calculated about everything he says. He does not just say things to say things. He is saying things with a purpose. It goes back to maybe what you said earlier, a message to the front office. I do find that interesting, though, when he says, I'm going to do everything I can. Well, what does that mean? Because Joe Burrow, there was a point where people thought he was realistically going to take a pay cut.
Yeah.
Not a pay cut, but he was going to take less than what his full value was. And then he came out and he did nothing wrong here, but he got the highest paid contract in the history of the NFL. He deserved that, no doubt about it. But he didn't leave any meat off the bone for that, right? And not that that's his responsibility. But he kept making it sound like we're willing to do what we need to keep everyone here. But that contract did not say that to me. And not that he needed to do that. Not that that's his responsibility. Jamar Chase, he said it in the postgame last night. He's going to, they're talking off to the side. They're going to do what they can. But Jamar Chase is going after the highest paid wide receiver contract in the history of the NFL. I don't know what these dudes are even implying when they say this, because what they're implying is what we perceive. But that's not what's actually happening here, and I'm not trying to make them the bad guys here. That's not their responsibility to keep T in Cincinnati, but they are fighting publicly to the media, sending a message to the front office. I just wonder Like, why now? Why is it, as we sit here in week 14, is now the time to publicly, aggressively go after this to try to make something happen? Especially after the game last night, like you talked about. It wasn't even like, that's why you got to keep him. That big game right there, that almost works against him. So that's why I thought that was
More of
strange.
those games last night, every single one of those increases the chances he's in Cincinnati.
Fair, because the value
Plummets. The closer he gets to 25 from 30, the higher the chances are he's in Cincinnati. I mean, if the other team offers him 28, I think T. Higgins has a legitimate conversation about, am I going to New England at $28 million or am I going to Cincinnati at $25 million? I think that's a conversation. When you get to 31, 32 versus 25, you're talking about generational wealth, another contract type of thing. So you're obviously going to take that other deal. I think that's the battle the Bengals are fighting right now, and that's my worry. Is I think another team is going to give him. I mean, I'm over $30 million, and top 10, top 5 maybe wide receiver money. I think we've seen the level of production out of him enough when he's been healthy enough that someone's going to make the risk that the injuries are a thing of the past, and maybe that's something that's going to pay off really well for some young QB around the league. And I'm certainly going to root for T. Higgins if he ends up somewhere other than Cincinnati. But I think if other franchises view the injuries as big a concern as the Bengals do, I think he's going to be in Cincinnati because I think the offers will be close.
And I agree with that. I will say T. Higgins last night, I don't think I got at least the vibes in his press conference that he's thrilled to be back. Like he was appreciative of what Joe Burrow said. He was appreciative that his guy had his back. But I didn't come away thinking that T. Higgins was very, very happy. Like, I can't wait to get back in Cincinnati next year. I can't wait for them to offer me whatever they're going to offer me. That's not the vibe I got from his side of things. It's great that Joe Burrow said it, but I didn't think it was reciprocated on T's end. And he could be back. He could just be playing it smart. He wants a good contract, and he's not going to give in to say he wants to be a Bengal and have the Bengals come in with a lowball offer like they did Jamar Chase. So we'll see what happens going forward. I'd just say that Zach Taylor needs the offense to be good. The way the offense has been good is with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Taking one of those players away is not a recipe for success if you're unable to draft and develop talent, which Zach Taylor's proven that he's unable to do that. So we'll see going into next year. It's going to be an exciting offseason for the Bengals because there's a lot they need to address, and they need to do it pretty quickly.
So just something to keep in mind, too. Last thing on this, and we'll move on. I want to talk some Reds coming up in a moment. But, you move on from T, you still need a number 2. You don't trust their ability to draft a number 2 wide receiver.
Right, unless you're picking the top 5.
Yeah, and we talked about that. So then you hit the free agent market. Here's what's out there.
Right.
So some of these names sound big, but you got to think of where they're at in their career right now. Stephon Diggs is on the last. This was I think he's a free agent.
Yeah, they bought out the last 2 years of his deal, so he's a free agent. But he also tore his ACL in week 6.
Yep.
So
Which makes him affordable.
But you're also talking about then getting into the season, and we know how the Bengals start slow anyway. You're really signing a guy.
And I'm not advocating these names.
No, I know. I'm just.
The pool of options not very good. Amari Cooper, Deontay Johnson.
I love Amari Cooper in a good situation.
Pass on Deontay Johnson.
Amari Cooper with a quarterback that cares. I think that's a good situation for him.
What did we talk about? We had some soul searching.
I just think that
we did have some soul searching.
I just think that Amari Cooper's career took a hit because they gave him some guy who openly didn't want to play football and was objectively bad at it.
He was the first Browns wide receiver to have back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons.
He was pretty good with Deshaun.
He was pretty good with Joe Flacco.
He was pretty good with Deshaun.
Joe Flacco came in and saved the vibes, and Jameis was going to do it for him too.
He never got the opportunity. You're not winning today. No,
he never got the opportunity to.
Amari Cooper
is great.
I'd take Amari Cooper. I'll take Amari Cooper right now.
So Deontay Johnson, no. But
he wouldn't go in if we asked him to.
Yeah.
He'd say no.
Tough place to be.
Here's an interesting Chris Godwin.
Now you're talking.
DeAndre Hopkins, Keenan Allen. These are some interesting names that are hitting the free agent market that
I would love Chris Godwin.
That you could get for cheaper than 30. That's why I'm not.
I don't know about Chris Godwin.
Godwin's going to take more than
okay.
30.
I think Godwin might be in the same conversation as T, depending on how this injury.
How old's Godwin?
Not as old as you think.
I feel like he's.
I don't want to throw out a number there and
but
be really wrong, but
I guess 31.
28.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah,
he's
going to get a
Joe
big time
Burrow's
deal,
age, right?
Yeah. I think Chris Godwin's one of the more underrated receivers, maybe I don't want to say NFL history, but certainly of this era.
Yeah.
I think the thing that kills him is he plays with the only receiver who's more underrated than he is, and Mike Evans. But 7,000 yards in his career, 39 career touchdowns, over 570 catches in 110 career games. I mean, that's That's unbelievably consistent.
He was on pace to win the Triple Crown this year if it weren't for the injury.
Yeah.
So
And the season that old Jamar's having too. That might have put an end to that. But the bottom line is these are like the Keenan Allen, the DeAndre Hopkins, the Godwins, Deontay Johnson. I'm done with that name. Like Stephon Diggs, that's out too because you talked about he wouldn't be ready for the start of the season. But the Amari Coopers. So let's just say Joe's advocating to bring back Higgins. It doesn't happen. You have to go fill a void with the number 2 wide receiver slot. Those are the names you're working with in free agency that you could still spend a pretty dime on and still save 12 million, 13 million in that range, assuming you can get, some of these guys for cheaper. Amari Cooper financially probably makes more sense to fill that void. And let me say this too. This isn't a shot at T, but all the number 2 wide receiver has to do is be good enough for the defense to not just ignore.
Yeah,
that's true.
Because that's really last night Jamar Chase was able to eat last night like every night just by T being out on the field. T's value to the Bengals sometimes is not even in the box score or in the stats.
1,000,000%.
It's strictly just being out there.
You can't double Jamar every snap.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you have to go to Burke or not Burke, if you have to go receiver from out or that they drafted that's been
Burton.
a bust. Burton, sorry, not Burke. If they have to go to Burton, no, everyone's laughing at it. They're not, I think skill-wise,
Even
he might
Yoshi.
hurt you. He might, and Yoshi. But they're not going to look at them with the same fear as T. But I think a Godwin and Amari Cooper, guys like that will hurt you if you let them. And I think just their presence, that's the big thing, especially with how dominant Jamar has been. Because we talked earlier in the year, remember Jamar's numbers fall off significantly when T's not out there because the defenses just don't fear anybody else in that offense when he's not out there. So they give all their attention to Jamar and take him out.
No, I think you're absolutely right. But I think something else we have to think about when we're talking about T. Higgins is the replacement is not necessarily just one of those pending free agents. I think tag and trade is something that's a lot of other people are starting to hop on my wagon here about, but we should tag and trade T. Higgins after this season and move on from him. Then call teams that have a receiver. Call teams that will be willing to send a receiver back. I know a coach who's struggling and is going to have a young quarterback after this year that's worked with T before down in Tennessee, Brian Callahan. I'm sure he'd love to have T. Higgins. I wouldn't be mad at a cheap Calvin Ridley as the number 2 in Cincinnati. He's younger than everyone suggests. That'd be an interesting trade. Maybe Ridley and some serious draft capital for T. Higgins in a tag and trade. Titans lock him up long term. Everyone wins in that scenario. I think that would be interesting and kind of alleviate the need to spend free agency money or draft capital on a wide receiver. I think that'd be interesting and give the Bengals an opportunity to address a lot of the other holes on their team. But I still think at the end of the day, this is a situation where you got to bring him back because you've seen the Bengals miss on mid-round receivers time and time again since T. Higgins. Trying to draft the replacement or trying to draft 3, I don't know, but they certainly haven't hit on any enough to believe that any of them can take the step to be the wide receiver too. So I don't know how you're just going to roll the dice again. And I also don't know how you can watch this team this year and justify a first-round pick on a wide receiver, which I think is what you would need to replace T. Higgins or a major free agency spend. And if you're going to spend $22 million on Godwin, why not spend $30 million on T. Higgins?
Is Auden Tate available?
Maybe.
We can bring back Auden Tate. Last played in 2021. If we can find him, locate him, and bring him home, we might have a chance.
So we went long. I went long on this, so we'll nix this. We're done. I have to go to commercial break. But to wrap it all up, I think it also goes back to Casey's point. The morale of letting another talent like T just walk out of the building is tough. That's a tough pill to swallow. If you're winning, those things get overlooked. But they're not winning, and those things just get magnified more. And I think that matters too. So that's always a good point when Casey brings that up, nonetheless. And also, they bring T back, and then they hit him free agency. And they have a couple draft picks that hit next year. Some of these rookies this year blossom in year 2. Then we're also not talking about the decision to bring T back. Then it looks smart. So it's not just the fallout from that decision and how all the other puzzle pieces fit in with the rest. But let's talk about and again, that's all off-season stuff for the Bengals. But let's talk about the off-season with the Cincinnati Reds. We've talked a lot about the Reds as of late. They've been very busy activity-wise this offseason. Obviously, they've traded Jonathan India. They get the qualifying offer done with Nick Martinez, and they're being rumored to be in on some big names, whether it be through trade or free agency. So there's a lot going on. But Josh Naylor is a name that was brought up recently, and I know that Nick Kirby had talked about this on Chatterbox Reds. An interesting takeaway from Nick Kirby regarding whether the Reds should pursue him or not, and then we'll get the guys' thoughts on whether the Reds should go that route as well. We'll get to all of that coming up. More Off the Bench next. No Garrett Crochet yet? Still not a Red?
Still not a Red.
Ooh, this is going to be like the Bengals. Or
They've lost interest.
Is this going to be like the Steelers and the wide receiver hunt? You remember where they're just always in on somebody and they just don't get them? But nonetheless, I've been keeping an eye.
Who's the Van Jefferson of the offseason market? Because we've been attached to the Brandon Ayuk's and the Devontae Adams already.
Who's the Van Jefferson
of the MLB outfielders free agency market?
Let me think of one. We lost Tyler O'Neill. There's got to be one available.
I was saying Conforto was even a higher level.
Yeah, Conforto's too high.
I was saying he was more like Ayuk maybe for us.
You have to give me.
I'll give you some time. I'll just put it out there.
I have to look at it.
Just put it out there.
But
this is what we do on the show.
I know that some people are getting to the points where the Reds keep getting brought up for a lot of different names. And, some people are like, we're tired of hearing the Reds name just involved in it. They need to pull the trigger. We've talked about it. They went out and they got a Terry Francona. You get the qualifying offer done for Nick Martinez. You moved on. You get Brady Singer and add him to the rotation. They were in or still may be in on Garrett Crochet from the White Sox. I know that the Red Sox are involved in this conversation now, as were the Chicago Cubs. So it's not like that door is shut. But what I'm happy to hear is that they're in on Garrett Crochet, but also looking at guys that can come in and make an impact in the lineup, as we've talked about. Paul Goldschmidt, I can't remember if you were here for the Paul. Yeah, you were. So we had the Paul Goldschmidt conversation last week, but a lot of different names. And what's key is a lot of different positions. It's not like the Reds are just, they're not telling you that we are 1,000,000% satisfied with our infield. We are not 1,000,000% satisfied with our rotation. They're making moves that we're like, man, I didn't think they needed to go add another starting pitcher, but here they are. Man, I didn't think they needed to tinker with the infield too much, but yet here they are. When you hear the name Josh Naylor pop up, and you look at some of the names that are popping up, obviously with the Guardians, a couple names that are popping out there, what does that name do to you guys? How exciting is that potentially for the Reds to might be able to get a deal done to bring him in to make an impact at first base?
Any of these names is a big deal to me because I didn't think, given the TV situation, that we'd be able to sign anybody. So the fact that looks like we're putting our name in the barrel and pretty much every single one of these free agents, it means a lot to me. It means that at least they're trying. Now they got to sign somebody. So until they sign somebody, it's just, it's whatever. But
I was going to say, how much credit do we give them on opening day for the same roster but being attached to all these guys?
Yeah, then it becomes zero. But as long as they're openly trying,
I don't think it's zero.
Do you think they're leaking? Do you think they're leaking?
I don't think they're trying on all these guys.
You think?
I just don't.
You think Kral's leaking it?
And maybe they are. But trying's the wrong word. I'm sure they're on the phone. I'm sure they're calling these agents. Sure, they're talking to these players. I don't think they're actually in the hunt for all of these big name players. I never know.
I believe, because that's come out that they're a finalist to get.
No, I know. I agree. But
didn't they say he was? Didn't they say he was out?
No, I've seen that, and then I saw that they were closer than they've ever been after that tweet. So who knows?
That's
yeah,
valid too. It's
all over the place, and then especially if you're going up against the Red Sox, who were listed as the second finalist for Soto at the end, or third, I guess they finished behind the Yankees as well. But if they're the ones going in there, they have the number one farm in baseball. They're itching to spend some money. I don't know. I don't think it's setting up great for the Reds to get a ton of these big names, but certainly is refreshing to be attached to them. How many off seasons in a row have they not been? It's great to have them try. I would like to see a couple go through the hoop before I really start celebrating this offseason.
Yeah, I'm not going to victory lap it. I'm just saying it's at least some positive to take away that it appears that they're given the illusion that they're making effort in the next season.
I've seen a lot of people turn their nose up at Naylor because they think, I guess, CES is the no-brainer first baseman in their opinion. I just don't, and I think Kirby actually had that take as well, that Naylor might not make sense unless you think CES or Candelario can play third. And I just don't know that you should go into opening day with CES as your, handing him that first base spot. I would love to go get Josh Naylor. I think he's a pretty good defender, and he's a borderline elite bat. I think he'd be an awesome first baseman.
People know my stance on CES. I'm a critic, to say the least. I'm not saying he can't be a good player. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying forcing him to be one next year can't be the correct solution to winning baseball games. He can be great. 3 years from now, he could be the best first baseman in the league. But coming into next season, we tried it, and it didn't work. I'm not saying give up. I'm just saying let's halt it, or at least slowly work up to him being the Reds' starting first baseman, and go to a Naylor, go to a Paul Goldschmidt. Give us a temporary solution so CES can develop and get better. Same thing with Noel V. Marte. I'm not out on these guys, but next year there is desperation. There is a 3-year window with Terry Francona, maybe 4. A 3-year window with Ellie De La Cruz, because God knows the Reds aren't paying him. If you have a limited window, why are we trying to force guys to be better than they are? It doesn't make sense to me right now. You have the ability to sign a free agent, a first baseman, that's going to give you more than what CES is going to give you. And maybe you can say, well, you don't know that. You don't know what CES is going to be. And that's fine. You could say that. I just know when he was up last year, he was one of the worst qualified baseball players in Major League
I
Baseball.
don't think he was one of the worst.
I think he was the
I
worst.
think he was the worst.
I know he was hurt. I know it. I'm aware that he was injured. But I'm just saying you don't need to force that next season. You can force it in 3 seasons down the line, in 2 seasons down the line. But next year, I want to try to win baseball games. It was very evident that you can't win solely based on what you think these prospects can be. It's hypothetical. You don't play hypothetical baseball. That's not what good front offices do. Well, Noel V. Marte could be really, really good. CES could hit 40 home runs a season. That's not why you build a roster. That's not how you do it. Do you want to develop him? Sure. I'd like him to be on the Major League roster. I'd like him to get at-bats. But he doesn't have to start every single game for me to sit here and say that the CES is going to be some great player down the line. He can be. But let Paul Goldschmidt, let somebody else, let Santana, I don't care who it is, let somebody else take the first baseman spot. And if CES surpasses him during the regular season, then he passes him. Great. I would love to see that.
Yeah, that's a good problem to have.
I would love to see Naylor get signed here and CES proves that he's a better first baseman than I would love it. But I wouldn't love having CES come up, be bad, and not having a backup. That's what I don't want.
So, and the one thing, too, is you're heading into a season where we feel like there's expectations and we feel like this team is going to be more than just competitive. You know, we always say that we just want this team to be competitive. No, we don't, because when the team's competitive and wins 86 games and misses the playoffs, that's competitive, by the way. 500 record, you know, that's competitive technically, right? We want them to be more than just competitive. But I don't know if you could do that heading into a season where especially if you just look at the infield by itself. I hope McClain stays healthy. I hope Marte can actually play at third base. I hope Christian Encarnacion-Strand can play first base and hit. I just don't know if you can go in with that many question marks. And if Naylor provides you we know Naylor could play at first. We know when McClain is healthy, we know he could play second. We know, of course, what you get with Ellie. I think you want to try to knock off you want to try to answer as many question marks as you can heading into the offseason. And if you end up creating a problem where Christian Encarnacion-Strand's playing really well and you have Naylor, well, that's a good problem. Figure that out. And that's why you have Terry Francona. But I don't think it'll ever be a problem to where we're panicking like, man, you have Christian Encarnacion-Strand playing well and Naylor. At that point, I don't care. That's a good problem to have when it's
a great problem to have.
Yeah.
But you can't rely solely on the prospects. You can't do it. It can't
you
just
can
be
if you're rebuilding, but they're not rebuilding, right?
I don't think they're rebuilding anymore.
Yeah.
I think they're past the rebuilding stage. Because I don't even know what they would be rebuilding to. You have 3 years of Terry Francona. It's win now. You have to win now. And you don't pay Nick Martinez whatever you paid him, $21 million, right? I mean, you don't bring in Brady Singer for Jonathan India. If I'm the Reds, I look at these next 3 years as a Kansas City Royal run. I say this year, we're just going to try to be better than we were last year. We're going to try to make the postseason. It's a weak division. You have a chance. Next year is when I'm going to say, and that's the 2026 season, is when I would say, all right, it's make or break. We need to win the division. Let's go. So if they don't go all in, quote unquote, this season, I'm okay with that. But knowing you have to do that either next year or 2027. That's what you have to do. CES can be a part of those teams. He should be a part of those teams in the future. But next year, we just need to be better. And being better doesn't include the same exact recipe as last year. We're just going to hope and pray Marte and CES and McClain and every one of these young guys is able to replicate one half-good season.
All right, and like I was, hope is not a game plan. I'm not a big. Well, we just hope that these guys get better from one year to the next. You can hope that those guys do that, while also adding guys that can come in and make an immediate impact and help improve your roster right off the bat. We'll step away for a few moments. When we come back, we'll have the clip of Nick Kirby and his thoughts from Chatterbox Reds regarding this situation. We'll continue on with Reds Talk when we come back.
The biggest question with Naylor is not really about Naylor, Craig, in my opinion. It's about, can Candelario and or CES play third base? And if the answer is yes, then I'm way more open to Naylor. I'm way more open to Paul Goldschmidt, which I poo-pooed all over last week. I'm way more open to a guy like Naylor if the answer is yes. But if it's not, it's a hard fit in. And Naylor's owed a ton of money. Over 15 million or almost 15 million in his final year. I'd have to almost be giving up nothing for Naylor. I mean, it would have to be very, very little because, I mean, let's face it. I just don't think Josh Naylor is much more than a $15 million a year guy. Now you're only 1 year, which I love that. I always big fan of overpaying for 1 year, but I don't think you can give up much prospect for Naylor. What you could do is you give up a prospect for Naylor, and you are going to get that prospect back, you hope, with Naylor, because you're going to qualify offer Naylor in 2026. And Naylor's, you would assume, would decline unless he has an atrocious year. He's going to decline that qualifying offer, and then you're getting that draft pick, which is probably equivalent to the prospect that you give up. So it'd have to be basically like a prospect that I think isn't worth more than whatever that pick is.
Noelvi Marte does not.
And that was Nick Kirby again yesterday, Chatterbox Reds, and just reaction to that. The bottom line is one thing he brought up too was I agree with him. I don't mind the overpay for 1 year guys. You know, if you're willing to tell a guy come here or to get a guy in a trade and you're willing to spend a lot on a guy for 1 year just so that money's off the books after 1 year, I don't mind that. He got into the fact that, okay, if you you go ahead and you go get a Josh Naylor and then you offer him, you give him that qualifying offer and he turns it down, you get that draft pick back, and basically all you did was spend 15 mil on a player to come in and just see if he's worth making that investment into next offseason, if that's the case. So bottom line, and you guys brought this up earlier, are they actually in on these guys? And we talk about this in college athletics all the time. A lot of times if you have a talent that's really, really good, but he's not a fit at your program, you still send him an offer. Because if he goes on to be really, really good and you didn't even offer him, they use that against you later on. See, these teams don't know how to evaluate talent, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes just being in is also just letting the fan base know, see, we're trying.
Yeah.
See, we're giving that effort. We're in. There's a lot of activity. I know this is probably wrong of me, but I can't believe I'm saying this. I trust that the Reds are actually doing this with the intent of making a big splash move. Not moves, but a big splash move. I do think they have one big move. And I'm laughing, by the way, because Mets fans, they're celebrating their Soto deal. And here we are. Guys, what do you think about Jesse Winker? We're sitting over here getting excited. Not excited, but weighing those options. And you got Mets fans who are celebrating Soto. But that's where we're at. But these deals like this, I think a Naylor deal is a huge deal for the Reds if they can pull that off. McClain hitting the way that we expect him to. Obviously, Ellie De La Cruz, we know what he's capable of doing. When you just look at the lineup and look at what they're able to do there, and you add a guy like that to bat like that, and then let's not forget about the defensive implications there. I'm excited about all the things that the Reds are in on. I just hope that they're not in on all these big names and then they make a couple moves and they're very underwhelming.
I think you're right. I think they have the intent of making a big move. Absolutely. I think this is real interest in these guys. I also can foresee this all falling through their fingers, and they just pluck the big names off the top. I mean, the Dodgers signed Michael Conforto and Teoscar Hernandez to be the best $40 million platoon baseball's ever seen. So there's not a ton of options out there anymore if all these guys are going to the same couple teams, which is the debate we've always had. I mean, two of the top outfielders went to the same team to platoon together, or at least reported that's headed that way, with Teoscar returning to Los Angeles potentially. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy when we're talking about the Reds trying to attack the outfielder market and you're battling against that. Like, I don't know. I'm giving them credit for being interested. I absolutely think it's real. I think they want to make a splash. I think they're committed to giving Francona a winning roster. My worry is just that, you're focused on the wrong thing and then it gets taken away. And by the time you shift your focus to the next target, it's gone. And then we're looking around and we are talking about those, 2 or 3 middling signings to try to raise the floor of this roster instead of anything that's actually a big splash.
Damn, I'm back to feeling negative again.
I hope not. I hope not. This is more optimistic than I've been about a Reds offseason in a long time. I think the Terry Francona hiring shows me that they're going to kick this in gear at least a little bit. So, I am optimistic. It's just, this is a step of optimism to believe that they're actually interested in these guys. Now, it's going to take another step that they're actually going to sign them. So, I have to see it before I believe it with the franchises in this city.
Yeah, I'm in the same exact boat. I would love to. Seeing is believing. I haven't seen it with the Reds. I'd love to see it this offseason. I just don't. I have a hard time believing that they're going to do what we want. I have a hard time believing.
Fair enough. The only positive spin to put on this, last year, there was no activity. None.
Yeah.
The Reds weren't in any conversations. Because I've seen some people come out and say, well, the Reds are always in on conversations. That's not actually true. Last year, there was no activity whatsoever. And that's why a lot of us were disappointed. Hold on, we felt like there was something to work with there. Now, that's not – hold on, let's restart that. They get Candelario. But it's not like it was they waited for that first wave of free agents to go. And then they waited for that second wave to go. And then they went in to sift through what was left, and they were able to pull off deals. I'm just saying it's not common. The Reds are not usually in these reports that come out where it's between the Cubs and the Reds to land a key trade piece. That's not common for Cincinnati. And when we have seen it, it's been for the Sonny Grays and the Trevor Bauers of the world. And that's around the time that we've seen in the past when this front office feels like they're in position to compete. They're willing to fork over the money. They're willing to give up some prospects. They're willing to be aggressive to make some moves. And I think that's something that is key. I think the front office is letting us know just by the activity that they feel like they're right there and they feel like, okay, we're willing to invest now. I've never truly believed when people talk about how cheap the front office is. Cheap, yes, but selective. I think they've been I don't think the Pirates care at all to spend money, even when they feel like they're close to getting a deal done. Although their name popped up for the Soto deal. Thought that was strange.
Let's not even.
Okay, let's not
That's
give
insane,
anything.
right?
Okay, yeah.
That was...
His deal is higher than their combined payroll for the last 10 years. You see that? I love those graphics that are coming out, by the way, just showing you just how sick Soto's deal is.
Yeah, there were 6 teams bidding on Juan Soto at a higher price point than Bob Castellini's net worth.
It's tough.
We're not even.
I didn't get to hear all of your thoughts. I rewatched.
Oh, my ADD.
I rewatched some of the show yesterday. Walk back that one take for me.
Why?
The one where Ellie is better than Juan Soto.
I didn't say he's better than Juan Soto. I said I guess it could have sounded like that because I get rambly sometimes. I thought when you look at the skill set of Juan Soto, who's an elite hitter. That's what he is, though, a hitter for right now. And Jacob convinced me a little bit towards the end of the conversation that some of this, too, at 26 years old, there's still a ceiling that he hasn't even got to. So they're paying for what he could be, too, adding on to this skill set. I look at the money that was paid for Shohei Ohtani, top 5 pitcher in baseball, top 5 hitter in baseball. That makes all the sense in the world to give him that money. That's 2 elite skill sets combined into one player. I have no problem with that type of money going to him. But Soto, I don't like that deal for him. I would be mad if my team gave up that much money to get him. Now, I say that as a Reds fan. If you're a Mets fan, you have Cohen, you can give out a couple of those contracts. When I brought up Elly De La Cruz, I brought up the fact that Ellie's not just a hitter. He brings everything to the table from, is he as good a hitter as Soto? No. But he still hits the ball. He has power. He can put the bat on the ball. He can put the ball in play. When he gets on base, it's a completely different ball game when he's on base as far as that's concerned, that skill set. And then defensively at shortstop, I just think he checks off more superstar boxes when it comes to getting that type of contract than a guy who is just an elite hitter. And I'm not trying to downplay he's just a hitter, but he's is elite at one thing. I think Elly is elite at a lot of different things. Shohei's elite at a lot of different things, and I do think that that's the difference for how I view it from that perspective. I know it's being spun on social media because I've seen the responses, and from what I said yesterday, it does come across that way, so my apologies, but in my head, that's how I view it. Elly's not even in this conversation yet, but I truly believe Elly has a skill set that is significantly different than anyone else in baseball. Soto, although better at what he does than anyone else in baseball, I think there's other guys who could still give you the same similar production in that regards, I guess.
I just think it's funny that if anyone on this show, he's the first one to get killed for being a homer. out of everyone on this show,
Very
you're the one that's the homer.
I'm not even saying you're like if you pointed to his contract and said 15 for 765 and said that was overpaid, I think you're right. I think that is an overpay.
I agree.
There's no world where I'm paying a player $55 million a year for 15 years. It's just not what I'm going to do. I know it's 51, but it's going to be 55.
You just mean the principle of it, just in general.
Shohei Ohtani's overpaid. Every athlete's probably more than not is overpaid. But that's the way the business works. My thing is, if you have an owner that genuinely wants to see their franchise win, you're going to pay whatever it costs, and it doesn't matter. To hell with everybody else. And that's where I think like he was going to get something outrageous because people want a player that, you are right. He's not the world's best defender, and he doesn't offer a ton of speed. He's just the best hitter in the league with the best approach.
Also, is he the face of your franchise? I don't think he is.
Oh, yeah, he is. Juan Soto.
Is he the face of the Mets? Not Lindor?
Yeah, Juan Soto is the face of the Mets.
Oh, you agree with that?
I think it might be Lindor.
I
I think that's closer than we think.
No,
because of how vibrant Lindor. Like Juan Soto's the better player. I'm saying just because like he plays shortstop, the flashy plays, that he's been there longer. Like it's certainly close, but I don't know that that's as crazy as it sounded off rip.
Because the Dodgers, as loaded as they are, they just gave Mookie Betts that deal a few years ago. When you think of the Dodgers, you think of Shohei now.
Yeah, Juan Soto would not be the face in the Dodgers.
But I guess that's my point here. Like,
well, in that sense, he is. He's the first player you think of when you think of the Mets now.
Soto?
Yeah.
Juan Soto is the face of the Mets. Juan Soto would be the face of every other franchise that's not the Dodgers.
Who will you see more often in terms of a Met talking to the media, hype videos, anything like that?
And it's
Lindor
not Soto's
Soto?
fault.
It would probably be Lindor.
I think so too.
That's why I'm asking about that, I guess. But
I could be wrong. We could be wrong on that. We'll see how.
Yeah, I mean, Mets fans are going to adore Juan Soto for 15 years. They are the luckiest people on planet Earth that they get to watch Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor for a long time. Hopefully, it results in a ring.
I'm just trying to convince myself they won't. Nah, guys like that stink. We want 15 million guys. That's where you succeed.
Yankees fans are cracking me up, man.
Oh, dude,
they're tweeting,
losing
765. What an overpay. We offered 762.
Sell out.
Yeah, this 26-year-old's gonna suck.
He won't be able to handle the New York pressure.
Yeah, what are we talking about, man?
But no, that's generally where that came from. That was the premise of the take yesterday. Either way, doesn't matter. That deal was going to get done for that amount of money. The Yankees. What did the Yankees come short of? I guess it came down to a suite as well. Did you read? He wanted his parents to have a suite, and the Yankees didn't even give Judge or any of their other top players a suite, so they weren't willing to do that with him.
I also saw it was with what the escalators were for the cancellation of the opt-out. The Mets go up to 55 if they cancel his opt-out after 5 years, and I think the Yankees weren't willing to go above 800 total million.
John Heyman said
Mets are at, 805 total now?
Yeah.
John Heyman said there was a story last year where a security guard didn't recognize the parents of Soto, and they kicked the dad out. And then also his driver, they kicked him out, and he had to stand out in the rain waiting for the car to be brought. Yeah, like they didn't know it was Soto's. Like, so there's just been some weird things that happened in New York with the Yankees. that led to unstable ground.
That happens a lot of places, like sporting events and stuff, where people don't know who people are or whatever, and they get arrested. Or with the Devontae Adams thing a few years ago, where the social media lady was in his face, like walking out. Scotty. Yeah, it happened at UFC this weekend. The security tried to detain Bilal Muhammad, the active champion, when he was trying to enter the ring. They were just like, "You can't cross this barrier," and he's like, "I'm the champion. I'm the champion. I can do what I want." I don't understand how that happens in sports across the country. It's bizarre.
It did happen to Joey Votto at Wrigley. Everett's right.
Wow.
That was very funny. It was a funny video that came out. He came out and said, like, "Yeah, I'm a player on the team." He went to, he was trying to get in early, I think.
Have you seen my TikTok? He should have just said, "Have you seen my TikTok?" And then they would have been like,
"Yeah,
dude, you're the TikTok guy. Get in."
Well, he won't be able to see TikTok much more any longer.
I know.
In about a month, no more TikTok.
Speaking of Reds' potential interests, Mark Feinstein tweets that the Angels appear to be close to trading an outfielder. Per source, Taylor Ward has been generating a lot of interest.
I would love Taylor
Reds
Ward.
have been connected to him for, it feels like, years now.
I would love Taylor Ward.
Deadlines and offseasons. That would be awesome. That'd be a phenomenal trade.
Love it. Get it done, Reds. Something. Get something done.
What do you think the highest deal the Reds would ever give out? And they're
We lost our minds at $225 million. Gosh, that's
what do you think?
pennies.
What do you think the most they would ever pay?
What do you think the market value for Ellie is?
Real quick,
right
use that as
now?
a tease. We're gonna. So, what
Okay.
do you think the most that the Reds would ever pay? And is Soto's deal already way past that?
Way past.
Way-
More
way-
than double past.
So is that so you're saying at this point there's a 0% chance the Reds keep Ellie?
No.
Well, we'll pick up with that when we come back then, because I'm confused. We'll be right back. More of Off the Bench next. All right, and we are back. Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Talking about the Soto deal. Now, Elliot had just asked, what do you think is the most that the Reds would spend on the deal? I followed that up with Soto. Is that higher than what the Reds would pay? Yes. So is there 0% chance they sign Ellie? You said no.
No, I don't think so. I don't think it's a 0% chance. I do think that this drastically hurts our chances.
Yeah.
I think the worst thing that could have happened for the Reds in this whole ordeal is for Juan Soto to nearly double the original offer from the Nationals, because I assume that Scott Boras, the agent of both Ellie and Juan Soto, will be reminding Ellie of that increase in pay every single time the Reds bring him an offer for the next however many years. But we've seen this happen other places where players get signed at contracts for ridiculously low amounts of money. And the one that comes to mind right now for me is Bobby Witt. Bobby Witt signed an extension. He's one of the best young players in baseball. He, certainly in the conversation, Ellie, him, Gunnar Henderson, best young shortstops in the whole sport. He's incredible. He signed a contract for less than $300 million to stay in Kansas City. Obviously, it's a little different with when he signed it. It was closer to when he came up. Ellie's kind of developed a little bit more as a relative household name now in Major League Baseball. It's going to be harder to get him at a bargain deal, but getting guys earlier in their contract to eat up some arbitration years, some years of that first deal or whatever, that's the Reds' only chance.
Tatis, I think, was the same.
Right. There's a lot of these big contracts to these guys. The way you get it done and keep them in these small markets is by doing it early and eating up those cheap years and giving them a benefit to taking a $300 million contract over a $700 million contract. Now, obviously, your discussion about, it's probably a 6-7 year deal or a 15-year deal. We're talking about a much different type of length here, but I don't think it's a 0% chance the Reds re-sign Ellie. I think it's low. I think it's unlikely, but I don't think it's zero.
It's why signing that Hunter Green contract that early was such an incredible move by the front office. They're paying him $9 million. He's a $25 million pitcher.
I was going to say, what did we just pay Nick Martinez? And
$21 million.
And we're justifying it to be a spot starter. We're saying if he does what he did last year, that's a good deal. Hunter Green's getting less than half of that to be our ace and a Cy Young caliber pitcher.
Unbelievable. Ellie De La Cruz, I think as of right now, if I were the Dodgers or if I was somebody else, I think he's a 10-year, $350 million player. That's at least as of this very second. I could see somebody. I don't think he's a $400 million player yet. I think he's a $350 million player, and I think that's about where the Reds' ceiling is.
I agree.
I think the Reds need, if they have any interest in getting that done at any point, you need to do it now. You need to do it as soon as possible, because with each passing season, and with each season he steals 90 bases, and with each season that he is making star-studded plays at shortstop, making all-star games, that number just keeps going. And it's going to keep going until it gets to a Juan Soto type of deal. Because Kinner isn't wrong in the fact that Ellie does do more things right than Juan Soto. Juan Soto just does one thing better than anybody else in Major League Baseball. Ellie can steal bases, he plays elite defense, and he can hit. He's a five-tool player. You pay that guy $500 million. You pay him $700 million if he's good enough, which we all know he will be at some point in his career. If I'm the Reds, I would try to get a 10-year, $350 million deal done as soon as possible. I don't know if that's even in the cards. I don't even know if Boras would pick up the phone for that deal. But that's at least what I think he's worth now, and I also think that is the cap. I don't think the Reds would do a Nationals deal. I don't think they would pay $440 million. I don't think they got it in them.
I think they'd put a crazy amount of years on it.
They might do that. If they did 440, it would be at least 15 years.
Yeah, 440, 17 years. Something crazy
It would be
like that.
it would be an incredible number. Like 18 years with an opt-in
Right. No, like they would control themselves and not Ellie. Like it would be, how can we get out of this at some point if they have to? Like it's going to be interesting to see the gymnastics they pull to try to pull this off, because do I think the Reds are going to sign Ellie? If you made me bet on it right now, I'd probably take the no long term. Do I think they're not going to try? I would also comfortably take the no. They're not just going to sit idly by and watch one of the most electric players in the history of this franchise walk out the door, especially after the next 5 years of him playing in Cincinnati. That's the other thing a lot of people keep forgetting, is he's here for 5 years. He's a free agent in 2029.
Yeah.
Like, this is just the start of his Reds career, which is part of why we are talking about you need to get it done now, because we've already seen how much his price has risen from his rookie year to this year. Now what happens from 25 to 26? What happens from 25 to 29?
What happens if he gets an MVP over the next couple of years, which is possible?
And also, what was the conversation we had? Juan Soto got that money because he's a 26-year-old free agent.
Yep.
How old's Ellie in 2029? He's 22 right now. That's 5 years. He's 27 years old.
It's a lot of math.
If he's been healthy, and he gets the power up and he drops the errors down, could he be $1 billion?
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me, but the way the markets are going in Major League Baseball now, it certainly it has a chance. There will be no salary cap.
The Dodgers will give him a 20-year, $1 billion deal, and he'll make $1.8 million a year for the first 10 years of that deal.
Yeah.
That'll hurt.
Then they'll pay him $900 million for the next decade.
I'm interested to see how it all unfolds, but if you have any hope in the Reds re-signing this guy, it has to be right now. You have to get Ellie De La Cruz right now before that number gets to a point where there's a 0.0% chance. Because there's not, to Jacob's
point. I think the deadline's about the All-Star break this year.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Like that immediate.
Oh, yeah. If Ellie's going to be a Red long-term, like I'm talking next decade, it's at the very latest, I'd say opening day next year. Not this year, but next year.
Yep.
I think once he gets these seasons under, he was an All-Star last year.
Yeah.
He's going to be an All-Star starter this year, I would assume. I don't imagine Ellie's going anywhere but up. And if you go up from last year, I mean, you're winning a couple MVPs in the next 5 years. Yeah. So I don't have a lot of optimism for the Reds re-signing him long-term if they don't do it quickly.
And you said 5 more years of Ellie. Might be less than that, because if they come to the conclusion that they can't keep him, the best way to maximize Ellie is to move on from him.
It'd be the hardest thing Reds fans have ever been put through.
And you don't wait until after 5 years. You wait probably. So we might get.
You get 3 years.
At least 3.
If you cannot re-sign Ellie De La Cruz, you have to trade him with a full year left. You have to, because if you trade him in that last year, you are getting kneecapped on the value you can get, because he's labeled a rental, and that's immediately changes what you get in value.
Oh, that's depressing.
The Padres traded their entire franchise for Juan Soto for a year and a half. Mackenzie Gore was the favorite to win Rookie of the Year that year when they traded him.
Yeah.
Like, C.J. Abrams, when he's not at the casino, is a damn good shortstop in Washington. James Wood was the number 3 prospect when he got called up in all of baseball? Like, trading players like Juan Soto, if you're the Nationals, like, God forbid, an Ellie De La Cruz, if you're in Cincinnati, that can save the franchise as opposed to dribbling up the clock and letting him walk to have an extra year or two of fun watching a star player and then having him leave in free agency.
Who's a player that just walked? Is Bryce that? Did Bryce just walk?
Yeah, Bryce just walked.
Bryce just walked.
Like just
from
walked.
Nationals.
Yeah. And they happened to win a World Series the very next year because he went to the Phillies.
Because you had a guy like Juan Soto in your farm system. Like, this is what I mean. Like, you have to replenish this stuff if you're going to lose great players. And I know that's not a conversation anyone wants to have, and we really shouldn't be having it right now. I don't know why I even brought it up, but if you're going to not extend Ellie, you got to get stuff back for him. This is the same exact conversation as T. Higgins for me. If you have a great player, you can't let him walk out the building for free. You have to get something in return if you can't keep him.
And if you think the All-Star break is that true deadline of having that conversation, then it actually is more relevant now than we think. And especially with that Soto deal.
People see 2029 and they think it's just like, we have all the time in the world. We'll see if he irons out the strikeouts and the errors before we give him this $400 million deal. Make sure he's more of a polished player before we commit the biggest contract in Reds history. The Reds don't have that luxury.
No.
Because once he becomes that polished player that you know is an MVP candidate year in and year out, if people still have doubts, then the other teams are in. Then the Dodgers are in, and the Yankees are in, and the Mets are in, and the Red Sox are in. Like, you can't battle with those teams. You found Ellie. You got your lottery ticket.
Yeah.
Now you got to hold on to it.
Yeah, if you've come to the point where there's no longer questions that he's your future, it's too late. He is not your future because you can't pay him now. You have to. If you have questions, other teams have questions too, and that's when you sign him. You have to take the risk. That's the game you play when you buy a sports franchise. The Castellinis, I'm sure they knew that coming into 2000, whatever, 4, 6. I don't know the exact year. I should have known that before I started this. But either way, they knew the game when they got involved. You have to take risks, and other teams have been successful with it. The Reds were successful with it with Joey Votto. That is objectively the right contract. That was a great move for the Reds organization. They have to do it again with Elly De La Cruz. And fans here are going to be upset with the number that he's going to get. It's going to be insane. It's going to be a number that Reds fans have not seen ever in their lifetime.
All right, this has been that wraps it up for us on the radio side. This has been Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. All right, and we are back. Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister, Elliot Burr, and Jacob Tissot with you here. We're trying to confirm. There's one report out there that it sounds like there's a chance that Bill Belichick might have just accepted the North Carolina job. We're not confirming that. We're waiting but we're seeing some stuff on social media. But you guys ever play that game where you see something and you just hold off on wanting to buy into it till you see, the gold check mark? It used to be the blue check mark. The gold check mark.
And now now people are getting the gold one.
You can get the gold one?
I got by a gold one a couple days ago.
Really?
Yeah.
How do we get a gold
one? I don't know. I think that's a Chatterbox.
You have to accept. You have to be a fan of the golden at bat rule. That's what. So you wouldn't get one, Elliot. You would be adamantly disqualified from getting one. But no, I didn't know that was up
this
for
is
sale.
This is saying that he has created a 400-page quote organizational Bible that dictates how he will run his program.
Also, part of the negotiations for whether or not he was going to take this job is he needed a mandate in his contract, a clause that Steve Belichick, his son, current defensive coordinator of Washington, was named the head coach in waiting, which means as soon as he retires, that North Carolina wouldn't have the opportunity to interview anyone else. It would immediately go to his son.
Whoa.
That's a clause that's been used in college football before to avoid interview rules and how many things you have to go through if you label an heir or a successor, but certainly interesting that he's making it his son, or that was at least one of the reported asks that he had out there. So yeah, no, that would kind of shock the coaching landscape if Bill Belichick goes to college instead of the NFL. I know a lot of NFL teams probably wanted him.
When North Carolina hired Mac Brown, I thought that was a great get. I was like, that's a very cool hire for North Carolina, former national championship winning head coach. I thought that was a great get for North Carolina. Bill Belichick is a great name for North Carolina, but a great get for North Carolina. Let's say that report is accurate. What does that do to North Carolina? Are they immediately relevant? Does this work? I mean, you've talked in the past about coaching styles matter in today's sports more than any. And he started to wear on NFL talent. I don't know him with 18-year-olds looking down on, he didn't like rookies to begin with in the NFL, and that's who you're technically dealing with at the college level. This just seems weird. I'm so back and forth on it. I know you've brought up the fact that, hey, this is actually he's going to be coaching guys that want to get better and that are striving to get better, and that's one difference there too. So they're going to be more coachable, right? Or are they? I don't know.
I think when you think about this big picture, I think it makes more sense for Bill Belichick to coach in college than the NFL.
Yeah.
He has more control over the program. He controls every player. 17, 18-year-old, 19-year-old kids in Chapel Hill, North Carolina are going to buy into the Bill Belichick system to try to turn that program around. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Great coaches get buy-ins in college football all the time. You get more buy-ins in college football than the best NFL teams.
Yeah.
Kids care about the culture and the Patriot way, the Tar Heel way, whatever he's going to call this. I think that flies in college much better than it does in the NFL right now. Every reason I had for why I didn't want Bill Belichick in Cincinnati or really didn't think he was a top-tier college or NFL coach anymore, all that goes away for me in college. They're going to give him, I would assume, full roster control, full GM control.
Yeah.
He's going to have control over the entire staff. There's going to be no one telling him what to do. I think this is perfect for him. I think it's exactly what he wanted. I do find it a little bit interesting that North Carolina said that Mac Brown was just a little too old and out of touch at 73 to carry this program on, so they're going to go with 72-year-old Bill Belichick.
Yeah. Well, Bill Belichick's a cool kid. I mean, he's a cool guy. He's going to go to the same parties as the rest of his team. Because,
and his girlfriend.
Well, his girlfriend's going to make him go to all those parties, as 22-year-old girlfriend. So
she just followed a couple of North Carolina accounts on Instagram, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
Good for him. 78 years old, dating a 19-year-old. Good for him.
Both of those numbers went the wrong way.
I know.
I think he's 72. She's what, 24? Something like that?
It doesn't make it better.
Would him going to North Carolina be the weirdest? I mean, we're embarking over the next couple of weeks on like these year in review type headlines and stuff. Would this be, if he accepts that North Carolina job, is that the weirdest storyline of 2024? I feel like I'm missing an obvious
Right
one.
now it is, but this storyline buried another coaching storyline that's way weirder. Remember we talked about on Friday before Belichick broke?
I feel like I'm missing an obvious
Lincoln
one.
Riley to UCF was linked.
Yep.
That would be 10 times weirder than this to me. You go from a program like USC in the Big Ten to UCF?
Well, UCF found their guy, though.
Did they hire someone?
Scott Frost.
Oh, they hired Scott Frost. Okay. Well, then this will be the biggest one then. If I mean none of the big name coaches leave their schools, then absolutely.
But
There's no bigger name than Belichick out there.
All sports. Like, did anything weird happen this year?
I mean, outside of Cincinnati, I think Terry Francona to the Reds probably shocked a lot of people.
Yeah.
In terms of coaching hirings.
Like, I guess that's a surprising. But Terry Francona managing a Major League Baseball team. Surprising that it was the Reds, yes, but
no,
Bill
you're right.
Belichick going to deal with college kids.
This would be like the Bengals firing Zach Taylor and him replacing Wes Miller. Like Bearcats basketball.
Yes. Which, by the way, big game coming up this weekend.
Big game. Are you gonna go?
No.
Marquette is.
I will not be going.
Marquette is playing at Dayton. Top 10 team in the country. That's unique. You don't usually see that too often, out of conference games especially, where they go to play at Dayton. And then, of course, Cincinnati Xavier. Pretty unique. There's a lot of good games in the state this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
So why aren't you going to it?
I didn't want to pay the money, and I don't want to
Are those
pay
like bumped up
$200
significantly?
for a loss. Huh?
Are those tickets go
it's
up
like $180
significantly?
to get in.
Yeah, I'm not interested in paying all that money to lose.
You think Cincy will lose to Xavier?
No, this isn't sarcastic. Have you seen what the record is over the last 25 years? Because it's not good. That's why, I have so little doubts, so little confidence that the Bearcats are going to win this, that and they're going to come out as 5.5 point favorites at least, probably.
You guys favored last year too, weren't you?
Yeah. They'll be favored in the game. I would imagine 5.5 points is my number there, but we'll see. We'll see. I wouldn't say I'm optimistic.
I forgot what I was going to say now. Oh, well. Oh, did you see earlier you laughed and said something about, me being called a homer is just kind of funny.
Because we are.
Yeah. Well, this is where Ohio State fans usually get pretty mad at me, but, the sensitivity from Buckeye fans, they need to just chill the F out. Kirk Herbstreit, well, I don't know what your take is on Kirk Herbstreit. I like Kirk Herbstreit.
I like Kirk.
Kirk Herbstreit came out and had an opinion, or just expressed it. I did not think it was a hater opinion at all. He had shared that when you saw the matchup graphic pop out that Ohio State would be hosting a playoff game with Tennessee coming to town, he goes, this is one of those weird scenarios where you would almost think it would benefit Ohio State to play on the road just because there's so much angst right now with dislike towards Ryan Day for losing the fourth straight game against Michigan. If they come out and they bring the punt unit out. They have a 3-and-out right off the bat. Like, it can get pretty ugly. That team could that fan base could turn on its team pretty quickly early on if things don't start trending in the right direction early on in that game. I mean, I thought it was a little silly, but I didn't think it was a bad take. He's not wrong. I guarantee you, if Ohio State punts on their first 2 possessions against Tennessee, there will be boos heard throughout the stadium.
I just got my tickets. I guarantee you I'll be booing if they punt in that game. Ryan Day is going to have to hear every word out of my mouth during that game if they can't get a win.
You are going to it?
Yeah, I bought back in. I'm going.
So, real quick, I want to talk about that. But
Didn't take long.
He says that. Fans are obliterating him on social media.
It's because of who said it.
Common Man and T-Bone, who I like over in Columbus, I disagree with them wholeheartedly. They went off and said, you guys are just now finding out that Kirk Herbstreit is a douchebag, saying that on the radio. And I'm like, because he said that? That's what we're upset about? Why does Ohio State fans have to be so damn sensitive to hearing something that actually is accurate? It makes all the sense in the world. He's not wrong. There will be boos if Ohio State doesn't, move the ball early on in that game. And now Kirk Herbstreit's being called a D-bag. The sensitivity amongst Buckeye fans, and there's a sensitive pocket of every fan base out there, but I feel like Ohio State might have the biggest pocket of sensitive fans over any fan base in the entire country. That's this stuff. I was expecting to tune into that clip and hear something like really hateful. I had to replay it 4 times because I couldn't find what they were talking about. Stop being sensitive. Stop being soft. And if you're one of those, my apologies.
I don't think it's a terrible take to have. I think the Ohio State is probably going to have the worst home field. That's bad wording. I don't know how to word it. The most volatile home field advantage in the first round. Like if Notre Dame goes down 10-0 to Indiana, those fans they're all 90, so they're still going to be sitting down, but they'll be cheering. Nice. They'll be excited for the Irish. They won't give up on the team. If Tennessee gets up 7-0, Ohio State is going to be a boo fest. Like, you're going to think they're playing in Neyland. So I understand the take that he's having. I think it's a dumb take. In no sense of the world would you rather play in Neyland than Ohio State. Like, there's just no world where you'd rather go on the road to an SEC school than play at home. It just doesn't exist. And I also think coming from who it's coming from, and Ohio State fans have hated him for a long, long time, that I think that just kind of adds on to it as well. I don't think it was a necessary comment. I also don't think it was a comment that really made a whole lot of sense when you look at what actually helps teams win in the playoffs. I do think it was Kirk trying to take a shot at Ohio State fans, which I don't necessarily have a problem with. I think it was a reasonable take. They are going to boo Ohio State. I do think it is interesting to note that Kirk Herbstreit's son did just commit to Michigan, had no other Division I offers. So just a pawn in the game.
That was a pawn. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but
Zero-star recruit, no D1 offers, commits to Michigan.
And he's going, he's never going to play a snap.
At least they don't have another quarterback in this recruiting class.
LOL.
A real QB battle in old Michigan. What?
I think it's a silly take, but Ohio State fans, it's the reason many people root against Ohio State.
Yeah.
Just because it's,
that's
how it is. Same way with Kentucky basketball.
Like I said, I just went back and re-listened to it, and I didn't have a problem with it. But it was just like the media in Columbus, too, losing their minds about that. By the way, our guy Jimmy, is he going to be calling the Notre Dame game? Is he going to be?
I don't know how that works because it's on Fox. It's on NBC. It's the first time since 1980-something that a Notre Dame game is broadcasted on Fox.
But on their student radio.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that works.
You have to.
Yeah, I'll have to give him a call.
I
know he's going. I know he said he's going. I don't know if that's with work or not.
He called. I saw he went to New York when they played at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
It's his last year of school, if I'm not mistaken. That's a pretty cool way to go out. He's had a lot of really cool experiences. So shout out to our guy Jimmy. Hope he's doing well.
Chat corrected me. It's not on Fox. It's on ESPN.
Did you guys? Yeah, you're correct. Did you guys talk about who has the best path?
Yeah.
Yesterday.
Oh, Penn State.
Pretty clearly Penn State, right?
It's Penn State.
And then Ohio State has the hardest path.
And my next question is: did you see the simulation that the guy did? The guy simulated all those games in College Football 25. Penn State was the national championship winner against Ohio State.
I think Penn State's going to go really far. They're set up for immense success. I love Drew Aller.
There's a lot of pressure on Ryan Day, but James Franklin, when you have to play SMU and Boise in games 1 and 2.
I don't know if they
They do
have,
not have the most to lose.
I was going to say, they don't have any pressure. They don't have any pressure at all.
No, they don't have the most.
They don't have
if
any
they lose to
pressure.
SMU, James Franklin's not even going to be fired.
They know they're going to be ranked top 10 every single year,
Yeah.
and they're all comfortable with that.
Yeah, Penn State's the biggest winner of the 12-team playoff at all.
This is just a joke.
They'll never.
They
It's
have
not a
the-
joke. That's
they
how they've
have the
operated. What do you
most
mean?
to
That's
lose. Like, the entire
Casey, you're
program is
wrong.
a joke if they lose.
Casey.
to
That's how
They
they've
don't
always
care about advancing in the playoffs. They care about going 10-2 and making it. They're not a championship program. To act like they are, you haven't been paying attention to Penn
They've
State.
never won a big game in the history of the program.
When have
they've
they
never
ever
won a big
competed for a
game.
championship to have that as a goal? Never. Never, not once. They're an Ole Miss. They're a post 2010 Florida.
It's okay.
They'll never be a top 2 team.
Yeah,
in the Big Ten,
they hang their
ever.
hat on making the playoff. That's what I mean. They're huge winners out of this already. But James Franklin's going to have a chance to play ranked teams as a favorite for the first time in his coaching career, honestly, and hopefully he can step up. But yeah, if not, nothing changes for Penn State. They are what we think they are.
Yeah, James Franklin won with the loss against Oregon in the Big Ten title game, which, by the way, was very good. That was the best of the conference championship games.
It was
pretty
awesome.
Good. High scoring, right up to the last play. 1-15 against top 5 opponents, or top 5 opponents, but also a losing record against top 10 opponents. You guys, so
update on Bill.
Oh, what we got?
He has agreed to become the North Carolina next head coach.
They haven't agreed.
We're waiting on North Carolina to agree.
Oh
boy.
That's awesome. They said, "You want to be the coach?" He said, "Well, you're going to do this." And they're like,
We'll get
I don't know
back to
about
you.
that. Yeah,
We'll get back to you.
We'll keep watching. We'll keep an eye on it.
No, I see both sides about the Penn State argument. I do not. Penn State's standard for football is not as high as it is at Ohio State and a lot of top-tier SEC schools. That I agree with them on as far as, like, are they going to be super angry if he doesn't? However, when you look at the path, if you're James Franklin, you make the playoff this year. If you don't at least get to Georgia, if you don't at least get to the semifinals, that is a failure of a playoff run.
Out of the first round matchups, Penn State losing would mean the least to the program.
Really?
Texas losing to Clemson would be terrible for Sark, and Quinn Ewers would get killed. Ohio State losing to Tennessee, Ryan Day would be fired on the field.
Franklin will not be fired. Franklin will not be
Franklin
fired.
would not be fired if they lost that game. You were
Franklin will not
wrong.
be fired.
I just completely disagree with that. But continue on with your point.
Like, Notre Dame loses to Indiana. You have every question in the world that Marcus Freeman's still not winning big games. Like, Penn State loses to SMU. Penn State's exactly what Penn State's been for the last decade. Like, nothing changes.
But Penn State losing top games to bigger schools, I think, is something like losing to Michigan and Ohio State. It's not acceptable, but it's understandable.
No, it's a
I don't think
different loss.
Losing
I
a
think
big game to SMU or Boise.
this would warm up James Franklin's seat for the first time.
Okay. Like, I would say more than warm up. I'd say he would finally get his seat boiling.
I think maybe next year they would have to win a game in the playoff for him.
Because I think both of you guys, I think everyone needs to come to the middle a little bit more on their takes. They're right. I don't think he's fired if he gets knocked out early this playoff. Should he? I'm on your side, yes. I think for the first time, though, because I've never heard. In fact, James Franklin was when the USC job opened up.
Yeah.
A while back, he was a favorite for that job, and everyone was like, wait, what? How is he the favorite for the USC job at that time? That was kind of wild. Was it the USC job or was it another? Oh, Alabama. He got brought up for the Alabama
He
job.
brought himself up for
Fair.
Alabama. He
Okay.
said Alabama is interested in me being a part of their head
that's
coaching
cute.
search.
Me too.
And
They
then
called
Alabama
me.
never gave him a call.
I'm. It's not just about James Franklin though. It's like the whole program goes from what it is now, a joke, to being completely irrelevant. Like, I think they lose out big time on recruits, on basically everything if they lose to SMU.
I think they've already won this year recruiting.
I
They've flipped so many recruits already.
Yeah, but you lose to SMU, I guarantee half of those are reconsidering. They're going to decommit.
Luckily, signing day was last week. Also, James Franklin's buyout is $57 million after this year. They're not firing him for a 11-2 season, making a Big Ten championship. For $57 million after going to a Big Ten championship, losing by a touchdown. There's just no way.
He is in a good spot because all he has to do is just be the third best or fourth best team in the Big Ten every year. And anything else that happens is fine. And anything more that happens is just gravy, right? Like, it is weird. It's actually one of the more cushiony jobs out there. I hate it that there's not more pressure on him. Like, I look at it as embarrassing if you, as Penn State, the Big Ten is supposed to be this big power-ass conference, third or fourth best team in this conference. And I think that you look at the fact that you have Ohio State or Oregon, Ohio State. I'd say they're the third best team in the conference this year. third best team in the Big Ten, a powerhouse conference, and you get knocked out by SMU or Boise, that's a problem. The good thing is I don't think that's going to happen. I think SMU I'd worry about more than Boise at this point.
Yeah.
But man, I love Ashton Jeanty. We're going to talk about him tomorrow because the Heisman candidates came out. But we're out of time. Look at us working over.
Just since you said his name, someone was arguing on Twitter today that Ashton Jeanty is a long run merchant. They said that 36% of his yards have come on 13 carries, and that's a negative. I don't understand some of these arguments here. It's bad.
Well, it's like when we
long
discredit
runs.
quarterbacks for the Jamar Chase, the yards after the catch thing that's used against Joe Burrow.
But this isn't using it against his offensive
they're
line.
Trying to downgrade him, right?
Yeah. It's a bad thing that he has 1,300 yard carries.
Yeah, it's silly. That's silly.
These arguments are crazy. We'll get into it tomorrow.
Yeah. But all right, that wraps it up for us. Till tomorrow, Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers.